was Halloween night of 2007, freshman year in high school, and I was with my friends Ivan, Ryan, and Jesse. We were all dressed as the Super Mario characters. I was Luigi since I was the second tallest. Ivan was Mario since he's short and buff. Not that Mario is buff. Jesse was Waluigi because he's freakishly tall and skinny, and Ryan was Wario because he's just really fat. So they were the perfect group costumes for us. We live in a very non-congested suburban neighborhood with a decent amount of space in between houses. On Halloween, that's the worst thing ever. Less bang for your buck. We were trick-or-treating for hours, way past dark, and eventually came the time when most trick-or-treaters were heading home. My feet started to hurt, and I had to constantly switch arms for holding the now 10-pound pillow sack of candy, but we planned on going until our bags were completely full. A lot of the houses by now weren't answering anymore. It was probably past their cutoff time for giving candy to trick-or-treaters. Approaching our next house, we saw a purple bucket on the stoop, which was the best feeling ever. I was the one to get close enough to realize it was empty, which was the worst feeling ever. I turned around when I heard a knock at the window of the house. We all looked at the window. Couldn't see anyone, but heard someone call out, "Wait." The door opened and an older man, late 40s, already balding, stepped outside. He told us to come inside so he can get us some more candy. I said we could just wait out here. He responded saying something along the lines of, "Nonsense, come on in, we'll get you your candy." Ivan stepped in and said, "It's alright. Come on Dan, let's go." I told the guy to take care and apologized. He just stood there watching as we walked off, not saying anything. I felt bad, but at the same time, that guy seemed like a creeper, and I figured I just dodged a bullet not going in there. If the story ended there, it wouldn't be scary, so of course it didn't end there. We skipped a few of the guy's neighboring houses just to get further away and continued on with our business. We were walking down close to the nature preserve now, so there weren't many houses around us. At this point, we were now walking back closer to Jesse's house. I noticed Ryan had stopped walking, and I turned around to see what's up. He said he heard someone moving from behind the trees in the preserve. Now this was before everyone's phones had flashlights, so we couldn't just go searching in the woods for someone. Besides, we were just telling Ryan that it must have been a raccoon or something. You may think this is a bit of a cliche, but when things like this happen in real life, you always assume the more logical possibility. It's just natural. Why would we assume we were being followed? I had to put my arm around Ryan's shoulder and nudge him forward. A little ways down the street, me and Ivan picked up on the sound as well. When we all stopped, the sounds of the footsteps from beyond the trees stopped as well. Ivan yelled at the obvious stalker to go away, or we would beat the shit out of them. I knew he was just bluffing though. I could hear the nervousness in his voice. The snap of a twig from beyond the trees triggered a fight-or-flight response in all of us. Me, Jesse, and Ryan all ran for it. Ivan was at first charging to attack, but he quickly followed after realizing we had all taken off. We ran down the dark street, and we all noticed the sounds of at least 2 or 3 pairs of footsteps crushing the twigs and leaves in the woods. We banked it hard right down Jesse Street when it finally came up, and ran straight for his backyard, entering his house through the back door. The first thing we did was peek out through his living room window. We couldn't see anyone. We all had to gather our thoughts and discuss what the hell just went down in his living room, when all of a sudden we heard Jesse's backyard gate slam shut. Jesse dove to turn off the lights. There was a click and a bang from down in the den. It was more than likely Jesse's back door. We all agreed to go down armed with knives and face them. Jesse turned on his back door light, but there was nobody out there. Just then the front door opened, and we all screamed like animals. Jesse's mom and sisters came rushing downstairs. They had just gotten home from their friend's little house party. We all rested assured knowing it was just them. Jesse explained what happened, but made it seem a lot less dramatic. Me and Ivan went home after that and called it a night. At 12:30 a.m., I got a disturbing text message. It was from Jesse. It said, "It wasn't my mom." I texted back saying, "What?" He responded back quickly, saying, "It wasn't my mom in the backyard." My fingers slammed the buttons on my phone, responding back, "What do you mean?" There was a long pause before he finally told me that his mom and sisters said they never went in the backyard. I told him to immediately check the backyard from his upper deck. He had already done just that. He also told his mom everything, and she had already called the police. They didn't find anyone back there, but Jesse did mention the guy who invited us in while trick-or-treating. Nothing ever became of that, and nothing ever happened at Jesse's house again after that one Halloween night. I moved to my dad's when I was 10, and I didn't know anyone in the area except for the family my dad was friends with, a single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple of years older than me. She was 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple of years. We weren't close, but we ended up having the same friends. One night my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom, since she knocks a certain way when coming in, and he answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's working schedule. She came in. This is where I don't know the details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbor's house to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her, and left her body naked in a bathtub. She even hid her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it. But they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. It happened to my wife's grandmother about 15 years ago while we were still dating. Her husband had just passed away about a year previously, but she'd been going down to the library and volunteering. It was exercise and socialization. This was in the winter, so her walk back was while it was getting dark. The library closed at 5 and there was some extra stuff to do before everyone actually left. And on this particular night, she turned down a ride from another volunteer because she needed to stay in shape. The house is about a mile away through some lightly wooded area in South Texas, and as she's about halfway home, she notices someone behind her. He's walking the same direction and gaining on her, which in itself isn't all that particular. She's old and thus not particularly fast, but in this case he seems vaguely sinister. They keep walking. Pretty soon he's right behind her. Then he falls into pace, just staying behind her. Now she knows something's up. But she's almost home. She can see the top of her driveway coming up, and she leaves her lights on so it'll look like someone's home when she's walking in. She just needs to make it another 150 yards. Then 100. All that time, she said he was so close that she could feel his breath on her neck. Around maybe 50 yards, it happens. A strong hand on her shoulder. "Okay, bitch, don't turn around and hand over your purse or I'll cut you." She stops for a second, then takes one big step forward, turns and shoots the guy in the neck with the .38 she keeps in her purse. The guy spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital before he died of complications. My wife's grandmother passed last year, but up to the end, she lamented that she pulled the trigger too soon. When I was young, I'd say 8 to 11-ish, my sister, whom is 7 years older, would babysit when my parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot and my parents made her smoke outside, of course. So I'd follow her outside, play around, annoy her and such. One day my sister notices a car at the end of the driveway, just sitting in the road. It's a white SUV with a bike rack on top. It has the most tinted windows I've ever seen. You could not see inside from the side. It sat there until she went inside, then would drive to the end of the road and sit at the church parking lot and wait. Wait until she'd come out again for another smoke. And it would repeat this. Odd, but my sister is a brave lady and just kind of ignored it. That is, until the next day while my parents were out again and it showed up again. It would sit at the end of the driveway and just watch. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister. I know, because if I didn't go out, I'd watch from the front window and it would just sit there and watch my sister. She told my father, who was a sheriff deputy at the time, and he called the cops and made a complaint. They showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by and nothing. Then one day, a good 9 months after this had all started and around 4 months since the last sighting, it was back. It became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside doing her nasty habit, and sure enough, here it comes. This time we were all alone as usual, and she decides she has had enough. She tells me to stay in the carport and she's gonna go confront them. She starts walking toward the SUV, and halfway down the driveway, she would later remark to us, "I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further, I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear." She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family car was in the shop for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck home for the night. While my parents are home, my sister goes outside to smoke. I go outside with her, and eventually the SUV shows up. She tells me to run inside and tell my father, and I do. My dad promptly gets his gun and starts briskly walking down the driveway with it in hand, in the direction of the SUV, but not leveled towards it. The SUV floored it down the road and peeled out onto the nearby large highway. My dad, being a cop, noted the year and model and distinguishing features. The scariest thing, the license plate had been covered in duct tape. We never saw it again. I was just 4 or 5 years old and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of the hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the 1st floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open in her room, which was directly behind the bed above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the doorframe of my mom's room. I should note her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and woke her up. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took me to wake her up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up at the doorframe, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of the bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe that the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. One day while doing my laundry, one of the lights blew out in my basement. My basement is set up so that the laundry room is split up from the other side of the basement with a wall and a door. In order to get upstairs, you have to exit the laundry room and go through the other part of the basement. So the light blew in the other part, not the laundry room. As it was the only light on that side, it was pretty dark. I finished the laundry I had to do while dreading the walk through the dark basement. I exit the laundry room, get halfway through the basement, and I hear a loud cackle. Imagine a sound people make when they imitate a witch. Take that and imagine the witch had been smoking for 50 years, making her voice deeper and hoarser. That's what I heard, clear as day, right behind me. I didn't hesitate to bolt for the stairs. I waited until my father got home and then changed the bulb. I have yet to hear that cackle since, and I have not told a single person in the house about it. This happened to a friend of mine. She told me about it about a year or so ago. We'll call her Minji. Minji is in her late 20s and works as an English tutor in South Korea. One evening, a few years ago, she was tutoring a high school boy. They were up studying pretty late and the buses stopped running. Being a long way from his house, the boy asked if he could crash on her floor overnight and get the first bus in the morning. Minji was very reluctant because inviting a teenage male student to stay the night didn't sound like a great idea, but he was begging her and eventually she relented. They went back into her one-room apartment and she got into the bed while he laid a blanket out on the floor and they both fell asleep. A few hours later, at maybe 2 a.m., the boy wakes Minji up. "I'm really hungry," he says. "Let's go get some food." Minji opens her eyes and looks up at him in disbelief. "Food? Now?" "It's 2 a.m. Go back to bed." But the student insists. "No, I'm so hungry. Let's eat something now." She tells him that there's some ramen in the kitchen and he could fix himself some. This doesn't satisfy him. He doesn't want ramen. "There's a 24-hour place just down the road. Let's go there." Eventually, after several minutes of persuasion, the boy gets Minji to come with him to the restaurant. They leave the apartment and head out. As soon as they're on the street, the boy turns to Minji and says, "I'm not hungry. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked under your bed. There's a man sleeping there." They call the police and discover that a homeless man had been living in Minji's apartment, sleeping under the bed for 2 months. The boy only saw him because he was lying on the floor, so he had a clear view under the bed. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of LA. The shortcut was all 2-lane road through total nothingness, except for a passing through Amboy. Amboy is a nearly abandoned town nearly as far below sea level as Death Valley. So I was driving by myself in the afternoon and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I'm driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stopped sideways across both lanes. A suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere and 2 bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away, and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and chamber a round. Something seemed very wrong. It looked too perfect, as if it were staged. An ambush? Something was just wrong. As I scanned the road, I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerve to the right of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it down, and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it, or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple of 100 feet and slowed down, so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rear view mirror, I saw that the 2 bodies had gotten up to their knees, and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment, my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor, and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies, or stopped my car closer to them. Some friends and I were doing some night fishing on the James River. We were sitting along the shoreline with a nice fire going, accompanied by the usual idle talk and a few beers, when suddenly, everyone just stopped talking, like a switch was flipped off. We were all staring across the river and felt as if something, or someone, was staring back. It was a very uneasy feeling, to which some of the group tried to shake off with typical macho humor. when a blood-curdling sound erupted from the other shore that froze everyone in their tracks. The sound was unlike any other that I had ever heard, and it made every hair on my body vibrate and tingle. The only way I could describe it is it sounded like a wild person with no language skills being gutted alive. No words, just this high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. Nobody moved or said a word. We all just sat there fixed in our stare, when just as suddenly, a second scream was let loose with even more force than the first. By this time, several of us were sprinting to our trucks that were parked a few yards away, retrieving various firearms. When we got back, we all sat there quietly, with our eyes fixed staring toward the opposite shore, watching the light from our fire reflecting off the rocks. We sat there waiting for another scream, or something to move on the other side of the river. Finally, a third scream came just as suddenly, but this time, it was on our side of the river, coming from the bushes about a yard away. We all hightailed out of there, leaving most of our stuff behind. When we got to our trucks, we heard the scream one more time, just beyond the tree line. We all floored it the hell away from there, and never found out what was making the sounds. It was a Friday night, and my friend was picking me up in his car from my house. I was in a hurry since we were running late for the hockey game in the city. The whole car ride there, we were having such a good time that I hadn't even noticed that I didn't have my phone. I searched the car seat, the floor, but it wasn't in the car. I was sure that I had just forgotten it. During the hockey game, I couldn't stop worrying that maybe I had dropped my phone somewhere, so I borrowed my friend's phone and ran to the bathroom. I dialed my number and hoped someone at my house would pick up. It took 3 rings before somebody picked up, but they remained silent on the other end. I yelled into the phone that I was just checking if I had left my phone at home. They didn't answer. I assumed it was my little brother just messing with me, so I hung up. I got home late that night to see that my parents weren't home. I got inside my house and called them to see where they were. They told me that they had gone out to eat and see a concert at the park with my little brother. They said they left soon after I had for the game, and they should be home in around half an hour. So I hung up and proceeded to look for my cell phone. But then I realized, how could somebody in my family have picked up my phone if they hadn't been home? I felt a pain in my stomach as fear swept over. It was at that moment that I heard the back door to my house open and close. I immediately jolted out the front door to the neighbors and called the police. Apparently, the back door was left open and somebody had simply walked into our house. Nothing was stolen, but the scariest thing is the thought that we could have fallen asleep with a stranger in the house. A while back, there was a family that moved in next door to my family. They had a son who was just twisted. He was obsessive over slasher movies and always wanted me to talk about shit that happened during my time serving in Vietnam that no normal person would want to hear. He also loved tormenting stray animals. This guy was a whack job. He was 19 at the time and my daughter was 7, but he always wanted to talk to her. He'd strike up conversation with her when she walked home from school. He would talk over the fence at her when she was playing in the back. But what really set me off was when he called our house looking to speak to her. That was it. I went over and flipped shit at him and his parents. Told him to stay the hell away from her and I'd better not ever see him again. That's when things got weird. My daughter was always a little imaginative and paranoid. She would think there were monsters under her bed and whatnot, so when she told me there was something living in her closet and she was too scared to get up and tell us at night, but it wasn't there in the daytime, we blew it off as no big deal. A few weeks went by and one night my wife and daughter were staying at my mother's for a girls' night. So I turned the key on the HBO box and watched me some movies, eventually falling asleep downstairs. At around 2 a.m., I get a call from my neighbor with a creepy son telling me something along the lines of, "We saw that you were up, so we called. Our son is missing. I went by his room to use the bathroom and his door was open, which isn't usual, and there was no sign of him. We need help looking for him. The phone call woke me up though. I wasn't up, so I asked why they thought I was. "Oh, we saw you walking around upstairs and the light is on." My blood ran cold as ice. I'd been passed out on the couch and I know no one turned any lights on. I hung up on them, ran outside to my truck to grab my shotgun, but noticed the sheriff pulling up to my neighbor's house by this point. I booked it over and told him there was someone in my house, and now I could see the lights in my daughter's room were on, and there was a silhouette pacing back and forth. When the deputies went in, they found the neighbor boy there waiting in my daughter's room with a nice little setup in her closet. He said he liked to watch her sleep in the moonlight.
When I was 21 years old, I would be home alone at my parents' house a lot. We lived on a little pond which was directly in our backyard. On the other side of the pond was a little town park. Our neighbors were a bit spaced out. It was a pretty upscale, expensive block compared to the rest of the town, so the properties were big. I'm fully moved out now, but this was back when I was in college. My parents make a lot of money, and we have multiple homes, so often I was home alone. It was a random night in the summertime. I was off from school, so I can't remember if it was the weekend or a weekday, but odds are since I was home, it was a random weekday. I was in the back sunroom watching a show. That was my favorite room in the house in the summer because it was the most cozy and had the best breeze with all the windows open. I was right on the corner of the couch closest to the corner window when I heard splashing from outside, like in the pond. It could have been a goose or duck. Sometimes they'd fight in the water and make a bunch of splashing sounds. So at first I ignored it, but as it persisted, I decided to lower the volume on the TV and listen. I put my ear up to the window even, and I heard consistent splashing sounds, way too heavy to be from a duck or goose. It sounded like they were splashes from a person. I opened the door in the sunroom and stepped outside to the deck. I looked out to the pitch darkness of the backyard. I now heard a man's humming along with the splashes. Someone was definitely swimming in the water. They were trespassing. Each house on the pond owned a specific chunk of the pond. I stepped inside for a second to flick on the lights to the backyard deck. As I did this, just a bit of the pond was exposed, and the splashes and humming stopped. Whoever it was clearly saw me. I wondered if it was one of the neighbors going for a swim or something, which also just seemed weird because no one really swam in the pond ever. But honestly, whether it was or wasn't a neighbor, I wasn't going to confront whoever it was. I stepped back inside and turned off the lights, of course locking the door as well. I texted my brother who was away at college about it. He didn't answer right away. I was trying not to creep myself out over it, but watching TV after this was kind of hard. I couldn't focus on the show. I looked out the window, but all I could see outside was darkness. I still had the TV on in the background, not realizing how revealing the light from the TV would be outside. And then, I thought I heard something on the deck. I hurried to find the remote and turn off the TV, and as the room went black and silent, it took me a few seconds to adjust, and realize that there was the sound of someone's heavy breathing right outside one of the many windows in the room. I instantly laid down flat on the couch to try and hide myself, and after a short moment of silence, a deep voice from outside the window said, "I see you." My heart dropped into my stomach. I couldn't decide in the moment whether to speak or keep hiding, so I just blurted out, "Paul, is that you?" Paul was the name of one of our neighbors. I said this clinging on to the hope that maybe it was him, and he was just messing with me, but the man outside didn't respond to this. I just heard footsteps walking away. As the barefoot-sounding footsteps faded to silence, I still laid flat on the couch, too afraid to move. I laid for a few minutes, before the thought to go check that all the doors were locked came to mind. I exploded off the couch and ran straight for the front door. It was locked, as was the side entrance door. After a little while longer and texting my entire family about what was going on, my dad told me to turn the backyard lights on and check if anyone was still out there. He basically told me to be the man of the house and protect it. So I listened and checked the back deck through the window. It was clear. I brought a big knife outside with me onto the deck, and I looked down. There were wet footprints that had half dried by then, but I could tell that they were barefoot footprints. I followed the trail of footprints around to the side part of the deck, and what I saw was nightmare fuel. The top part of someone's head, namely their eyes and forehead, was peering just over the edge of the deck from the ground below, looking at me as if he heard me coming and was waiting. As we made eye contact, he turned away, and by now I was ready to call 911. I did so before even telling my parents. I locked myself inside, waiting for them, and when they came, I felt instantly better. They asked if our family had any enemies or people who don't like us, or if we have any problem neighbors. Questions like this. They did do a quick sweep of the property and then left. I decided to shut every window that night and run the air conditioning just for added safety. When I awoke the next morning, I was just delighted to see sunlight. I don't believe that man ever returned to our house, and we still don't know who it could have been. I have a dog who I take for a walk 3 times a day. First in the morning, then in the afternoon, and finally at night. I take him on the same route every time, which is through our driveway exit, which leads to a cul-de-sac parking lot for the condominium complex we live in. This will make sense soon as to why I'm telling you this. On the night walk, I always go somewhat late. I'm not sure why, but it's been a habit ever since I've had him, and it's never been a problem for us. Until one night, I begin our final walk of the day and go our usual route. I have a flashlight with me as there are no lights at the parking lot, and I'm listening to music with only one AirPod as I feel it would be for the best just in case I heard something unusual. And I did. As I'm approaching the parking lot, I was hearing something. A voice of some kind that was up ahead of me, but I was completely zoned out in my own world of music as it was happening. But then my mind finally caught up and I stopped. I took the AirPod out and stood still to listen, just to see if I was only hearing things. And then it happened again, a voice that spoke ahead of me, but I couldn't see anyone, so I did the stupid thing and continued to carefully walk forward because I thought it was all in my head. But something didn't feel right about it. I stopped again after a few feet right next to where all of the cars were parked, and I had my flashlight pointed everywhere in front of me. I stayed listening, and the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me yet was hearing a muffled voice of what sounded like a kid say the word help. My heart dropped so fast I couldn't move my legs. I frantically pointed my flashlight everywhere to see where it was coming from. I was sure it was coming from the cars, but I was completely thrown off by this. But there wasn't a kid in sight, or anyone nearby. It was just me and my dog, who didn't seem to notice anything as he was just sniffing some bushes nearby. And then I heard it again. The word help was spoken 3 more times, and it was coming from my left side where the cars were parked. It made me panic even more. I didn't know what to think of it, and I knew I wasn't imagining this when I saw my dog's ears perked up, and he was looking in the same direction I was facing after it happened. And that's when it hit me about how incredibly eerie all of this was. After hearing it multiple times, I realized the kid's voice didn't sound entirely like a kid. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like the mix of an adult and a child at the same time. And each time they called for help, not only was the voice always muffled, but it was spoken in a more generic statement as opposed to a cry for actual help every time. And I mean that literally. There was absolutely no change in the tone, inflection, sound, or anything of sorts. My dog and I ran straight home afterwards, and I tried to explain to my mom what happened. She was puzzled herself about what it could have been, and I suggested we call the cops on the off chance that there was actually someone in need of help, but she didn't think it was necessary. So many questions were conjuring up in my head. Why was the voice muffled? Was there someone in the car that I couldn't see? Or was it something darker waiting for me to move closer? I don't like to think too much about it, but whatever it was, it still makes me feel extremely disturbed to this day. This picture is where I had stopped and taken my AirPods out to listen, and I heard it up ahead on the left. This is where I had gotten closer and heard it on my left side. I'm aware that there's a condo complex on the right side, which some may think the noise was coming from, but it was in this direction facing the cars where my dog and I heard it, and you could see from this point of view that there's nothing to really indicate a noise coming from somewhere else. Also, at the time this happened, the cars that were parked were trucks and SUV types, so they were a lot larger and covering more space, thus making it harder to see from where I was standing. I never figured this out. What I'm about to tell you is the reason why my parents moved out of a house that was in the family for 3 generations. I've struggled with depression most of my life. It's hard for me to shake the feeling of being useless. I'm doing much better now, but when I was a kid, it was horrible. Because of that, I spent a lot of time alone in my room. My house was nestled in a very woodsy area. There were trees on 3 sides of it and a forest separating it from any neighbors. My room was pretty big for a bedroom. It was in the back corner of the house, so the windows on 2 walls faced the woods. It was honestly pretty scary for a kid my age. It didn't help that I was also scared of the dark. Things started happening when I was around 10 or so. I was in the 5th grade, and I was at the age where it wasn't acceptable to sleep in my parents' bed after a nightmare, but I was still accused of having an active imagination. The first thing I noticed was my nightlight. It had different color settings, so if I wanted, I could change the LED around. I liked keeping it on red, which is what I fell asleep to most nights. One night, though, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night, which was unusual for me. I was really tired and fell back asleep in under a minute, but before I did, I noticed that my nightlight was a different color than the red I always left on. I didn't think much of it until about a week later. One morning, I woke up and realized my nightlight was once again not set to red like it always was. I asked my parents why they were messing with my nightlight, but they were confused and told me they didn't know what I was talking about. I explained what had happened to them, and they told me that the thing had always been glitchy. They knew best, so I accepted that answer for a while. At least until one morning after waking up to see my nightlight unplugged completely. It was just sitting there on the floor. Once again, my parents dismissed my concern and told me my brain should be focused on school. My dad said I was getting too old for a nightlight anyway. A few days later, my nightlight was missing completely. It had seemingly evaporated out of existence. Now I knew my parents were lying to me. They probably thought I should have outgrown the nightlight by then and took matters into their own hands. This incident caused a massive fight between them and I, since both of us accused the other of hiding it, and neither of us was budging. I couldn't believe my parents would blatantly lie to me about something like this, but there was nothing I could do. After that, things went back to normal for a week. That didn't last long though. 3 nights in a row, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night. Each time, I had no idea what was waking me up. After it happened a 4th time in a row, I told my parents. They told me that I was going through puberty, and that changes to my body are natural. The next time it happened, I stayed awake instead of falling back asleep. A few minutes after I woke up, I heard faint rustling noises from my closet. My parents didn't believe me. My dad even checked my closet, and there was nothing in there besides old toys and posters. The next 4 days remained the most traumatizing nights I've ever experienced in my life. I'd been woken up only to hear rustling in my closet. It was torture. I couldn't take it anymore. I begged my parents to believe me, and my dad got angry. He dragged me to my closet to prove there was nothing in there. He started throwing toys around my room, clearing the closet bit by bit, yelling at me the whole time. That is, until he pulled one of the posters off the wall. My mother and father stared in horror at the massive hole in the wall the posters had concealed. My mom started screaming, and my dad pulled out a flashlight. The hole was way too deep to see where it led, so my dad ran outside and began inspecting the outside of the house. There was a tiny hole in the dirt at the base of the house, and a little digging revealed that it was more than a divot. There was literally a passageway from the woods to my room. My mom and I were out of the house that night to my aunt's house. We moved out shortly after this. I stayed at my aunt's house until we did. I don't like thinking about this experience, but I'm gonna have to face it eventually. My parents also refused to talk about this incident, and I think it's partly because they feel some blame for not taking me seriously. It's chilling to think that there was a stranger in my room every night for over a month. I have no idea what they wanted, and will probably never know. If your kids come to you with something that sounds abnormal, believe them. My name is Leo. To be completely honest with you, I'm a little lost in life right now. I won't get into it too much, but all you need to know is that my family situation is horrible. And for the past 3 years, I've tried to stay as far away from home as possible. My close friends from high school have been changing in ways I don't like, and I feel like my hometown has nothing to offer me anymore. I'm about to be a senior in college, and to be completely honest, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with my life after that. Enough with the sob story, though. I was in Berlin last year for whatever reason, probably searching for a sense of place or trying to find a direction in life. I remember the name of the bar I was in, Reduya. I was there alone, nothing I'm not used to. I was getting ready to leave when I felt around my pocket and realized my apartment keys were missing. Just my luck. I stumbled out of the bar and began walking toward my apartment anyway. The whole thing was locked up. There was no way I was getting in there, and it was way too late at night to get a replacement set. I'm not sure what most people would do in a situation like this, but my first thought was to start looking for a place to sleep. As if my luck wasn't bad enough, it started raining. Eventually, I decided to sleep under a nearby bridge. I didn't even know where I was, but I was out of the rain and safe, so I was happy. As I was drifting off, I began picking up on some faint voices coming from across the river. I sat back up and saw what looked like 5 men standing on the opposite side of the river along with a little boat that was tied off. They didn't seem to notice me. It took me less than a minute to realize what I was watching. There was an honest-to-God drug deal or something going down right in front of me. My German isn't great, so I wasn't really able to make out what they were saying, but several briefcases and duffel bags were exchanging hands, so I filled in the blanks myself. I thought about finding a new spot, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself by moving. I figured I'd just wait for this to be over, then leave. All of a sudden, one of the men yelled something aggressively in German and pointed a gun at one of the other men. There was a brief moment of silence before the other guy put his hands up and began talking really quickly. It looked like he was being set up. The other men stripped the man at gunpoint of his clothing and started confiscating his belongings. I didn't feel safe there anymore and got up slowly to move. As I did, I heard one of the men shout what roughly translates to, "There's someone there." I started running, not even turning to look at them. They shouted more things at me, but the only words I was able to understand were, "Don't shoot." I ran until I threw up and nearly passed out due to drunken exhaustion. There was no way they'd be able to catch me, but they could have easily killed me. Sometimes I still think about how I could have lost my life that night if those men had decided to fire at me. Sometimes I feel like I'm fated to run forever. It was a normal Friday afternoon at my high school. I was walking down a hallway with my friend Emma as she talked about God knows what. I was just trying to get through the day because I honestly had a lot to deal with at home as well as at school, being that my foster parents weren't the nicest people to say the least. As we walked past the lunchroom, I suddenly had to use the bathroom. I asked Emma if she had to go. She said no and that she would wait outside for me. I went into the bathroom and immediately noticed no one else was in there. I thought to myself, that was weird, because out of the multiple bathrooms in the school, this one was always packed at any given time. I shrugged it off and went into a stall, and a few seconds after getting in the stall and sitting down, I heard the bathroom entrance door open and shut abruptly, and someone entering the bathroom, but I didn't hear them move after entering. I didn't think anything of this. It wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Maybe it was someone hiding from an admin. I went about my business. I stood up to button my jeans and read the writing on the bathroom wall. There was a bunch of random quotes and rants about teachers. Then I heard the door open again, and I assumed whoever was in here had left. I came out of the stall, and as I left the bathroom, Emma was looking at me with a weird face, almost like a "what the hell did I just see" face. I asked her what was up, and she asked me, "Who was that standing right behind you in the bathroom stall?" I got chills. I told her no one was in the stall with me and to stop fucking with me. She promised me she wasn't. She told me she actually came in seconds before I came out because she realized she did need to go. But then she saw someone else in the stall, standing with their shoes touching the back of mine. That's how close they were behind me in the stall. And she said she left immediately, not wanting to witness whatever was going on. I reiterated again I was the only one in the stall. However, I had heard someone come in, but I never heard them use the bathroom, and I had assumed they were hiding from an admin. That's when she told me no one went near the door until she came in seconds before I came out. I didn't believe in the paranormal, but this made my stomach sink. I found an admin and told her about it, and she pretty much tried to assure me that it didn't happen, that Emma was probably just messing with me. But Emma was never one to take things seriously or be serious in general, so when she looked me in the eyes with a serious face and told me word for word what she saw, I felt like it actually happened, and something really was in there with me, along with the fact that I heard the bathroom door open and close twice. I'm 18 now, and I haven't forgotten it since. This happened long ago when I was renting a small house in the town that I got my first real big girl job at. It was a small one-floor house with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and just enough living space for myself and occasionally hosting some people. I had been living there for a few weeks already. All was fine. The landlord, who I'll just call Michelle, was really friendly and understanding. I think she rented to me because she didn't want a male renting out her house. I'll skip unnecessary details and get right to the point. Something very weird started happening a few weeks into living there. One regular work night, I got a knock at the door. I went to the other side and said, "Who is it?" and no one responded. I didn't open it. No one should be knocking on my door late at night. It was early the next morning. I had finished getting ready for work and was about to leave. I opened my front door and saw a big post-it note taped to the storm door. It said, "Hello, beautiful." I right away remembered the knocks on the door from last night. It was no doubt the same person, but the big question was, who could it be? I crumpled it out of disgust and threw it in the trash, hoping and assuming it would be a one-and-done thing. It was that night that I got another knock at the door. This time a little earlier, while I was cooking dinner. I went over to the door, this time not saying anything, just listening. There was no peephole or glass to look through to the other side. I had no way of seeing who was there without opening the door, and that wasn't going to happen, as the storm door didn't lock. But this was the second night in a row, and now I was realizing this was some kind of stalker situation. I called my mom and dad to ask for advice, and really, they didn't even know what to say. My dad, who was a retired police officer, said that if I called the cops, they wouldn't really be of any help unless they were catching the person in the act. My dad advised me to not go outside late at night for a while, don't answer the door, and if it persists, that he'd come to town and spend a few days with me. So that was the advice I followed. The next morning, the first thing I did was check the storm door for another note, and part of me died inside when I saw another note stuck to the glass. This one said, "I like to watch you." I took a picture of it with my phone and sent it to not only my family, but Michelle as well. I asked Michelle if she had any kinds of issues with certain men or any stalkers. She acted appalled and shocked when I sent her a picture of the note and told her about the knocks. She assured me that she didn't have any stalkers and that she was in a long-term relationship. Still, I wasn't entirely convinced. I left a note on the door after work that day, saying, "If you're looking for Michelle, she does not live here. She only rents this house out. If you continue to come here, I will be reporting this to the police." Doing this gave me a level of comfort, actually. I thought this would end things. That night, every waking minute was spent with anxiety, worrying about hearing knocks at the door again. To my relief, there were none tonight. I went to sleep in relative peace, thinking my note worked. The next morning, I opened the door and removed my note from the glass, but then realized it wasn't my note. It was a new note, and it said, "I'm not looking for Michelle, I'm looking for you." And then it said my name, followed with, "I like watching you," like it said in the previous note. I sent it to my dad right away. I felt seriously ill. My dad packed a bag and drove up first thing. He was at my house by the time I got home from work. And work that day was rough because I couldn't think of anything except for this horrific situation. I even wondered if someone in my office could have been doing this. like this creepy guy Fernando. My dad and I waited to call the police together until later in the night when we figured whoever was doing this may be hiding out there already. We wanted them to see the police presence. We spoke with an officer outside. My dad said it must have been a busy night since they only sent one. My dad, being a retired police officer, obviously didn't hurt in this whole situation. After the officer left with his report, my dad stayed out on the front stoop for hours, even after I went to sleep. Obviously the person didn't return that night, and I moved out once I was able to pack all my things. Michelle was completely understanding. Thankfully, whoever was stalking me at that house didn't follow me to my new place, likely eliminating the possibility that it was a coworker. So I will likely never know who it was. I'll be honest with you, I've probably spent more time chasing women than I'd like to admit. I've had to tone it down a lot since college, partly because of what I'm about to tell you. I went to school in California, and while I haven't been back in a while, when I was there, the culture was very open. And when I say open, I mean sexual. This honestly could have been true for other colleges in other states at the time, but I really wouldn't know. It was my sophomore year, and I had just finished pledging the fraternity Pike. About halfway through the semester, though, I was getting sick of only talking to sorority girls that seemed to know half the guys in every frat. It was honestly a little gross, and I started developing a fear that every girl I was interested in had been with several people I personally knew. I tried my luck and created a Tinder profile. It wasn't long before I matched with someone whose interests seemed to match mine. We started talking, and things were going well. After a few days, we made plans to meet up at a local college bar called Tap House on a Saturday night. This was actually my favorite bar in the area because it had pool tables and I had been clearing racks since I was 10 years old. I remember getting there a little early so I could secure a table and warm my muscles up a bit. An hour passed though, and I came to terms with the fact that I had probably been stood up. I was trying to decide whether I should salvage the night or just go home and play online chess when I got a notification. To my surprise, it was Yamel, the girl I was waiting on, telling me she had just arrived. I greeted her, and she apologized for being late. We got some drinks, played some pool, and got to know each other. She was Latina and a heavy drinker, so I got plastered just trying to keep up. At one point, she asked for my Instagram, which I gave to her. 10 seconds later, I found myself staring at a collection of explicit photos she had just sent me. I was confused, but in my drunken state, I wasn't going to complain. Before I could even respond, she told me, "Your turn," which I figured could only mean one thing. Honestly, if I hadn't been so drunk, I probably would have questioned why we were sending pictures to each other when we were literally 5 feet apart, but I didn't have the foresight. I complied with her request. We laughed about the whole thing, and that was that. A few hours later, things at the bar were starting to wind down. I was planning on inviting her to my place, but she beat me to it, asking if I could spend the night at hers. I agreed, and we left the bar. I couldn't even walk in a straight line. It was honestly embarrassing. We Ubered to her apartment, which was actually in Oakland, something I hadn't realized before. Honestly, red flags should have been going off in my brain the moment we crossed into Oakland. She unlocked the door of her apartment and stepped aside so I could go first. I took a few steps inside and heard the door shut behind me. It was pitch black in there. As I was turning around to ask her to flip some lights on, the room lit up. To my horror, I wasn't facing a harmless 5'2" girl anymore. Instead, 2 massive bald dudes with tank tops were standing in front of the door with their hands clasped. I turned around, and there was another white bald dude in front of me. I wish I could tell you more about the room I was in, but it was honestly difficult for me to recall small details of that night. I couldn't fight or flee, so I just froze. The guy in front of me began telling me my own name, birthday, and age. He then went on to say that the girl I had just gone out with was 17, meaning I had received and sent explicit pictures to a minor. He then suggested that I do what I was told, which I did. The 2 guys behind me confiscated my phone, wallet, and keys, all of which I gave up without a fight. I asked the guy in front of me what he wanted, and he basically told me that he was a major distributor of illicit substances in Northern California. He told me that I'd be outed as a pedophile if I didn't distribute his product to my fraternity and university. I wish I could remember more specifics. The two men behind me then gave me a piece of paper and told me to write down my address, followed by a list of names and numbers for as many students as I knew. I told them that I'd need my phone to complete the list, so one of them held it firmly in front of me and let me scroll through. All three of them were hovering over me now, knowing I was basically checkmated. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but the literal second I saw a chance, I ran. I was too drunk to think about the consequences of those pictures on my phone. I narrowly escaped out the door I had entered from and ran as fast as I possibly could. It's not like I was safe though. I was still smack dab in one of the most dangerous places in America. Eventually, I found a nice looking house and begged them to open up. I pleaded with them to let me use their phone and call 911, and then I told the police everything. But of course, I didn't remember the address of that girl's apartment. An officer picked me up and took down a report before asking me if I would be okay leading them back to that apartment. I was actually able to retrace the way I had run, and I waited in one of the squad cars as the police barged in. After a few minutes, an officer told me that the place was completely deserted and there were not any signs that people had even been there. In the following weeks, the police actually took my report seriously and launched a full-scale investigation. They concluded that it was probably gang-related, but were never able to arrest anyone. That was years ago. I bet this incident has been swept under the rug of Oakland's rampant crime and drug-related activity. In all honesty, what happened to me all those years ago is probably nowhere near the top of the list when it comes to that godforsaken place. I haven't used a dating app since. I've been smoking cigarettes every day for years. Before you judge me, let me just say that I recently started seeing a therapist for my nicotine addiction. Unfortunately, it hasn't helped much. The only thing worse than my nicotine addiction is my sleep schedule. I don't know what it is. I find myself staying up hours past midnight and rarely get out of bed before noon. While I'm trying to fix these parts of my life, they're extremely relevant to what I'm about to tell you. It began a few months ago. I was standing on my balcony, like I do most nights, smoking a cigarette. I live in a really secluded neighborhood. It's not like the houses around here are right next to each other. Despite this, I have a neighbor whose fence I can see over if I'm standing on my balcony. I'm not nosy or anything, but this particular night, I was looking into his yard. I had never met the guy, but I assumed he lived alone since there was only ever a navy blue BMW parked in his driveway. But not this night, though. There was a black van I'd never seen before sitting in front of his house. I didn't make anything of it, just noting the coincidence to myself. The next night, though, I made it a point to pay attention to his yard, and the same black van was parked there again. I didn't assume something sinister was going on. I was more intrigued than anything. The following morning, I went up to my balcony and looked into his yard. The van was gone. For the remainder of the week, I made a game out of observing the van at night, theorizing its purpose. I said I wasn't nosy, but I sure am obsessive. It's actually the main reason most of my friends drifted out of my life. I wasn't going to do more than observe, though. It wasn't my business or place to poke around further. That is, until one night, when I saw something that completely changed my perspective of the situation. I was up later than usual. It was maybe 5 in the morning. The van was there, as it had been the past several nights. I was smoking my last cigarette when my neighbor actually walked outside, something I hadn't seen yet. I watched as he made his way to the van, carrying what appeared to be a long black bag. It almost looked like a set of golf clubs, only much heavier. After opening the van's sliding door, he delicately placed the bag inside. He promptly got in the driver's seat and sped off. I was dumbfounded. I had absolutely no idea what he could have been carrying. I was exhausted though, so I figured I'd think about it more the next morning. The next day, I decided that I'd go out on my balcony a little earlier and wait for the van to arrive at his house. I brought my laptop up there so I could get some work done and wait. It was around 10 p.m. and the van wasn't in the driveway, but around 1 a.m. the van pulled in. I quickly shut my laptop and watched. Nothing happened for a good several minutes, like the van just sat there, engine running and all. After about 5 minutes, the driver door opened and there he was. I watched as he went around to the side of the van, then slid the door open and pulled out the same bag that he had put in the night before. He seemed to be struggling this time around, visibly trying not to crack under the weight of whatever was in there. After waddling a few slow steps, both he and the bag disappeared into his house. I didn't know what to think. I thought about waiting there until 5 a.m. again, but that would be far too taxing on my brain. Something was definitely wrong though, and I was determined to find out what. The next morning, I flipped a coin and ultimately decided to follow his van when he pulled out that night. After a pretty unproductive day, I went up to my balcony around 4 a.m. and waited, cigarette in hand. As soon as I saw movement in his driveway, I rushed downstairs, grabbed my keys, and got in my car. I turned my headlights off and waited for the van to turn onto the main road. Once it did, I began tailing it. After 20 minutes of driving, he pulled onto a dirt path that looked like it led into the woods. It did. I followed, and the woods actually started thinning up a bit. It seemed like this path had once been a main road or something. We drove for another few minutes before I realized what his destination was. There was a deserted gas station literally tucked away in some clearing in the woods, and right in front of it was the BMW I'd always seen parked in his driveway. I feared I was getting too close, so I turned my car around and parked across the street from the dirt road. I must have waited there an hour. His BMW finally pulled out of the clearing. Nervously, I started driving back up the path, not sure what I'd find. I pulled over on the side of the road and started walking towards the gas station. It was eerie. The front door was locked. I walked around to the side. That was locked as well. So was the back door. I needed to know what was inside. There was a row of windows that I tried to open, but none of them would budge. Against my better judgment, I picked up a rock and slammed it into one of the windows. It shattered pretty easily, but there must have been a security system in that place because alarm bells started blaring. I sprinted back to my car, the whole time wondering why an abandoned gas station would be rigged with an alarm system. As I sped out of there, I called 911 and gave them a vague description before hanging up. I got back to my house and ran inside, my heart still racing. The next morning, I woke up hoping the whole thing had blown over. Boy, was I wrong. I went up to my balcony to see like 8 police cars in my neighbor's driveway, lights flashing and everything. I watched as an officer escorted my neighbor out of his house in handcuffs. One by one, the police cars drove away and I was left to my imagination. I lit a cigarette and stood there, finally alone with my thoughts. I've asked the police for details on several occasions, but they would never answer my questions. I've even tried driving back up to that gas station, but the whole road had been blocked off. Maybe one day I'll work up the courage to walk through the woods and go looking for answers. I'm not somebody who grew up with any kind of sleep disorders, such as sleep paralysis or night terrors. I've always been a very heavy sleeper, so that's why when what I'm about to tell you started happening, it was a shock to me. We all have the occasional nightmare. I used to call nightmares a free, 3D immersive horror movie. To most, that will probably sound freakish, but in a weird way, I sometimes like the thrill of waking up after a nightmare. I was living with my one roommate, Patricia. I just called her Trish. We had very different schedules with work, so we didn't see each other much besides on the weekends. This happened in July. I remember because it was so hot out that I had the window AC unit on full blast every night, which also provided a white noise that helped me sleep better. It was the first night that I had the nightmare, a few days after my ex and I had broken up and life wasn't exactly the best. I had a dream that I vaguely remember for the most part, but the part that I vividly remember is being in a room full of my family members sitting quietly around a dinner table, and standing across the table from me was what I could best describe to be a creature that looked like one of the aliens from the movie Signs, only with horns and claws. It looked like what you'd imagine a sleep paralysis demon to look like, only I was still fully asleep and dreaming. The next thing I knew, the thing was standing next to me, looking down at me. I started to run away in my dream until I was in my room, or I guess my brain's version of my room. That was the last of that dream I remember before waking up. My room was pitch black and the AC fan was on full blast. My heart was racing a bit from the dream, and I sat there thinking, wow, that was a creepy dream. I looked around the room naturally before laying back down and going to sleep. The following night, I woke up in the middle of the night to my bedroom door open, which I usually 99% of the time would leave shut unless I was drinking. My immediate thought was that it was Trish checking if I was home. I went up to go shut it and went back to sleep fairly quickly. I asked Trish if she came in my room the next day via text, and she told me she did not. So it was always possible I just took a midnight trip to the bathroom or kitchen that I didn't remember. It was the following night that I had another nightmare. That same demon creature from my previous dream appeared again in this one. This one was a lot more disturbing. Instead of being with my family, I was in a dark, square, empty room with the thing, and it kept getting closer to me. Oddly, I don't remember the thing actually moving its limbs to walk. I just remember that it kept getting closer and closer until it was on top of me. And then, like I couldn't even move, the thing took a claw to my thigh and scratched me, and I actually think I felt the pain in my dream. Then, the next thing I remember is waking up. I don't mean I woke up right after that. I mean I don't remember what happened after that in the dream. But it was dark in the room once again, AC on full blast. I felt a slight stinging feeling on my upper thigh. I felt it with my hand, and I actually felt like I felt something on the skin. I rushed to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, and I screamed out loud when I saw a gash in my thigh. I went to Trish's room and turned on the light, waking her up. She asked how the fuck I got that, and I screamed I don't know. We went to my room together and flipped off all the sheets and covers off the bed, looking for any kinds of bugs or spiders or any sharp object I could have laid down on, which, yes, I understand makes no sense, but what else were we to think? Trish then looked at me and said, "Wait," and put her finger to her lip. She turned off my AC unit, and for the first time in days, the room went quiet. It all became sickeningly clear in an instant, as we both heard a sound from under my bed. The kind of faint sound that you sense from another person just existing in the room. I'm impressed at both of our ability to not scream right on the spot as we both looked at the bed and then at each other, and then left the room and then the apartment. We knocked on the neighboring apartment door until he answered. We asked him for help. Someone was in our apartment. He was an older guy, so I don't think we expected him to go fight some stranger in our apartment. He let us use his phone to call 911. At some point while waiting for the police, we heard a door outside slam shut. It sounded like our door. None of us could look out the window in time to see who it was. When the police got there, we confirmed the intruder was gone. We did leave all the lights on in the apartment when we ran away though, and left in a rather sudden fashion, so the intruder definitely knew that we knew. And then came the reflection I had of my dreams, and what they actually meant. That demon in my dreams was supposed to be him, even in the first dream. And with my door being open that night, that means he or she may have been roaming around our apartment at night, possibly eating our food. And to think this person actually scratched my thigh so hard it left a mark, it's actually really disturbing to think about. This forever changed my outlook on dreams and nightmares. This happened when I was a little kid living in our old house in Suffolk County, Long Island. I'm gonna say I was about 6 or 7 years old. My older brother and I shared a bedroom on the top floor that used to be a separate apartment that my dad rented out to an old lady, but she moved out, and so the upstairs was mainly for my older brother and I at that point. The layout was as follows. At the top of the stairs, on the left was our bedroom, which used to be the old woman's living room. Straight ahead was the bathroom, and to the right was an extra kitchen and a small bedroom. We had a million toys in our room, as the room itself was huge, and it also had 2 parallel crawl-in closets on opposite sides of the room where we stored a million other toys and board games and stuff like that. There was one toy though, a race car with a bunch of buttons on it. The buttons would make the car's lights turn on momentarily and play varying sound effects such as honking, revving, and driving sounds, and a little rock song. It was a toy we had for like ever, because it was originally a gift from my brother when he was a little younger. It was a random night. My brother and I were both in bed, not yet asleep, when suddenly, like a jump scare from a scary movie, the loud revving sound of that car toy suddenly activated, along with the lights of the car in the middle of the room. I looked at the car and instantly got scared and accused my brother Luke of doing that to scare me. He was laughing hysterically, saying he didn't do it. I was completely terrified. The toy then stopped making noises and went quiet. I was extremely unsettled, as any little kid would be, but nevertheless, time marched on and I fell asleep. It wasn't for a while until something else happened. One night, when Luke and I were both in bed again, we both heard a weird thud in the room. Luke insisted on trying to creep me out, saying there was a ghost in the room or something, and I kept yelling at him to shut up or I'd get Mom. He kept laughing until we both noticed a light in the corner of the room. It was the toy car again. I got out from the bed and ran straight down the stairs yelling for my mom. I got to my parents' room and yelled there's something in our room. I'm sure I gave a little 7-year-old spiel about how there's a ghost in the room, hearing a thud and the lights on the toy car turning on. Luke entered the room, and my mom defaulted to telling him to knock it off if he's trying to scare me. He said how could he turn the lights of the car on from his bed? I slept in my parents' room that night because I was too scared to sleep upstairs. It was a long while after that night and nothing happened. Not until one night. Luke was not in the room. My guess is he was having a sleepover with one of his many friends. I was sleeping in the room by myself that night. I had long since tucked that car away in the small bedroom across the hall because it freaked me out. After my mom kissed me goodnight, I asked her to keep the door open since I was always scared when I was alone in the room. I rolled on my side and tried to go to sleep. But being that I was scared of being alone, I had a hard time getting tired that night. I felt wide awake. Then, there was a sound I can't explain that came from down the hall. I flipped over to face the door, and the toy car rolled into the room with its lights on. I let out a scream straight from the bottom of my stomach as I cried for my mom and pressed my body up against the wall. Moments later, my parents both came up the stairs into the room, noticing the car on the floor. I screamed that someone pushed the car into the room. My dad went to go check the other rooms, but said there was no one there. There weren't any places to hide up there besides the closets and under the beds, and my dad checked all of them. I don't know what my parents thought in that moment. On one hand, they probably thought the toy was malfunctioning or it's just my imagination. But on the other hand, I think they were also slightly freaked out. That toy car didn't have a feature to move on its own. My dad smashed the toy and threw it in the neighbor's trash to make me feel better. I slept in their room for a while until my dad forced me back upstairs eventually. This story is the reason why I believe in the paranormal and something after death. This was an eye-catching post made in 2014, though it was eye-catching for the wrong reason. The advertiser states that he's seeking an unpaid young houseboy that will care for him, but he had to note that he meant in a non-sexual way. He also notes that he's a 55-year-old male who lives alone with his cat, but even if that isn't slightly concerning considering he's seeking younger males to live with him, he claims to have had 3 houseboys before. This could leave one to wonder whatever became of them. The lighting, angle, and just about everything else regarding this man's picture mirrors something straight out of a serial killer playbook. These kinds of ads are the very likely ones to be leading to something far worse than would appear on the surface. This was the listing for a bed frame that a subscriber named Rich sent to me and actually responded to. Firstly, right off the bat, the ad looks a little sketchy, starting off with the poor grammar and misspellings. Next, the poster claims that he's not storing the bed frame in his house anymore, but rather behind his buddy's storefront. This begs the question, why? Also, where is this storefront? What does it look like? If these weren't red flags enough, Lauderhill, the town in which this ad was posted, has an extremely high rate of crime. Rich explained in his email to me that he comes from a very poor background, and even though he saw the red flags in his post, he was willing to drive over to the location he received after texting the number on the ad. He drove to the location at 10:30 p.m., which turned out to be a closed-down looking thrift store. He stepped out of the car with the engine still running, and he said he knew to look straight for the bushes next to the storefront, where he could easily see 2 men hiding. He got back in his car and drove away and reported the ad. This was an incredibly creepy Craigslist post of a man looking to start an all-female band, specifically consisting of women aged 18 to 21. You could just assume by the looks of the ad and the man himself that he strongly considered typing 16 or 17 instead of 18. The ad calls for young girls who aren't afraid of older rocker dudes telling them what to do, and apparently that wasn't the only listing this guy posted. In one picture on this separate listing, the guitars and amps can really draw your attention away from the gross carpet, messy bookshelf, and bottle collection. But in the last picture, the man for some reason thought it was a good idea to capture his bandaged up foot in frame. This was a very transparently predatory Craigslist ad targeting young women. There's a section on Craigslist called Misconnections. This section is home to personal advertisements, which arrive after two people meet but are too shy or otherwise unable to exchange contact details. Like everywhere else on the website, weird things are posted in this section, such as this ad. The ad was posted by an anonymous man who seemed to be stalking a young boy. He said in the ad, "We've met on several occasions. Well, we haven't formally met, but I've seen you. You like to wear that Mets hat a lot. I love the Mets. If you like daddies, hit me up." The post actually included two photos of the boy on candid camera, one in a grocery store and one outside in a seemingly wooded area. The boy looked to be no older than 14. The ad was taken down the same day it was posted. This ad was posted in January of 2014 in Australia during a major heat wave. Temperatures were reaching up to 114 degrees Fahrenheit in certain regions, so this ad probably seems like nothing short of a miracle at first glance. The ad offered free ice cream to anyone in the area, claiming they were doing it out of Christian courtesy. The ice cream truck would be parked in a location that would only be disclosed to people who contacted the poster. One person did end up contacting the poster of the ad, and was told to meet up at a certain parking lot outside of Kings Park. The boy and his brother who answered the ad, who said they arrived partially just to see if it was legit or not, did find the ice cream truck in the parking lot. But two police cars were also parked alongside it. It turned out the ice cream truck was stolen. The refrigerators in the ice cream truck were turned off and all the ice cream was melted. Who knows what they really meant by Christian courtesy? This one wasn't disturbing in the same sense of the others on this list, it's just creepy. This was an ad posted by a 26-year-old asking for a female roommate who he would waive the rent fee for only if they were willing to create some kind of romantic relationship out of it. Being that this was a guy posting on Craigslist proud of his openness of his intentions, it's likely he may have wanted more than just a relationship, possibly some more immediate services. There's a lot of these kinds of posts offering free housing for young women for relationships or open minds in return. In July of 2015, the FBI arrested 39-year-old Nathan Bryan for allegedly trying to solicit children for sex by advertising his babysitting services on Craigslist. Federal investigators suspected that Bryan was using the ads to gain access to kids, though this wasn't enough to prove that he was guilty of anything. So the FBI posed as a father who was offering their child for sex on Craigslist. That's when they were contacted by Bryan, warranting his arrest. This was one of Bryan's many Craigslist postings where he advertised his babysitting services. It may not seem too bad on its own, but knowing who was behind this listing is what makes it truly horrifying, and that any other listing like this one could have been created by someone with completely masked intentions. This is Richard Beasley, a man who was sentenced to death for the murder of 3 men who responded to an ad he placed on Craigslist for a non-existent job. He was also convicted of the attempted murder of Scott Davis, a man who answered the Craigslist ad, who was then shot in the arm while escaping from Beasley. This is the only screenshot that could be found from the specific ad that he posted. The ad said, "Wanted, caretaker for farm. Simply watch over a 700-acre patch of hilly farmland and feed some cows. You get $300 a week and a nice 2-bedroom trailer. Someone older and single preferred, but we'll consider all. Relocation is a must. You must have a clean record and must be trustworthy. This is a permanent position. The farm is used mainly as a hunting preserve, is overrun with game, has a stocked 3-acre pond, but some beef cattle will be kept. Nearest neighbor is a mile away. The place is secluded and beautiful. It will be a real getaway for the right person. Job of a lifetime. If you are ready to relocate, please contact ASAP. Position will not stay open." 3 out of the 4 men who answered this ad were shot dead by Richard. This is another Misconnections post seeking another unknowing individual. This one is much more disturbing, however, as the poster, or stalker rather, has the young girl's address, He even posted a picture of the 14-year-old girl's house. In the post, he wrote, "Dear Sarah, you don't know me yet, but I've been watching you these past 2 weeks. You are a beautiful girl who needs to be taught certain things, and I could teach you those things. I could give you all the money you could want, and much more. I can promise you nothing but an amazing life if you choose to run away with me." The rest is just both his and her personal info. Now, this ad was screenshotted by a few people before it was flagged enough times to be removed. I was never able to find more details, such as if the family was made aware of this, or if the poster was found, or even if it was just some kind of prank. This ad was posted on June 10th, 2014, under the free stuff section. It advertised a free couch in good condition that would be put out on the curb around 10 p.m. In a normal neighborhood, this would seem like a lucky find. However, this ad was posted in one of the worst areas in Detroit, and one of the most dangerous times to be wandering the streets. Not to mention that anyone living in the area that this ad was posted in would not be looking to give a couch away, rather looking to make any penny possible off of it. This was a screenshot taken of the ad by someone who came across it. There's no way of knowing if someone actually fell victim to this, but this ad just had too many red flags about it. Most likely a group of people waiting for a naive victim to rob or harm, like the bed frame listing mentioned earlier in this video. This Craigslist post was an alleged confession of a murderer who was gloating about his first killing to the people of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It said, "I wanted to thank Tulsa for letting me have my first kill. It all started here, so I was thinking it should also be my first. I was nervous as hell, but I will get over it. It was a stranger on stranger kill, so the police will have a difficult time. It will not be my last, though. Thinking about going to Oklahoma City for the next." This wasn't the only ad of its kind to pop up. In fact, there was a second one that I could not find a screenshot for, which apparently showed a picture of a victim's body and the poster gloating over his second killing. This one took place in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and while it didn't mention a link to the first post, it seemed like too much of a coincidence. This is a rather strange ad by a young man looking for a roommate. When visitors to the ad would be greeted by this picture, which looks like something taken from a horror movie, they likely would not take this ad very seriously and would never dream of taking this guy up on his offer. Now, if that intro picture isn't enough to creep someone out, some of the rules and aggressive writing underneath should do it. Some ground rules. If I ring the bell in the kitchen, it means you have to go to bed no matter what time it is. I do not like people staying up late. You may have a friend over, but if they speak too much, they must leave. I like peace and quiet. No Indian visitors. Never touch the shower curtains. If it's closed, you come and get me and I pull it back so you can shower. There's two other pictures, one of a dimly lit room and one with a garbage bag over a window. If this ad was legit, let's hope this guy never found a roommate. This last ad was very open about its poster's intentions, and it's titled "Cannibal Looking for Willing Victim." This ad included very graphic, blurred images that would give you a good idea of what exactly was going on to the victims. The ad said, "I'm going to be very open about my intentions. I am a cannibal and I'm looking for a willing victim." He even uses the word victim. "If it has been your dream to donate your body as food, please contact me as soon as possible. I will not be torturing you or providing you with a slow death. Think of this as sharing your generosity with somebody else."
You can feel comfort in storing your private belongings inside lockers and other storage devices. However, sometimes the private belongings found inside these storage devices are rather strange and disturbing. Number 10. The only time it's acceptable to keep around a headless doll is the 5 minutes between the dog ripping the head off and you discovering it. When someone stores a headless doll among knives, it's most likely a problem. Robert Dewey Hoskins, who was rearrested after escaping from a mental hospital in February of 2012, was convicted of threatening to murder Madonna, and that headless baby doll was found in his storage unit in Long Beach. LA Weekly reports on the 10 creepiest items found in the Madonna Stalker's storage unit. Besides the headless baby doll and dozens of knives, Hoskins kept a very scary clown mask, a sumo wrestler baby doll, a Barbie backpack, and so much more. Number 9. A married couple with 2 kids made a horrific discovery when the mother, Mrs. Copeland, found a safe in her 10-year-old son's room. When questioned about where he got it and its contents, he simply pleaded the fifth. Both parents were unable to get any info out of their son. Eventually, Mr. Copeland was able to pry the safe open and was shocked at what he found inside. The head of their dog that had recently passed and was buried in their yard was stuffed into the safe. Blood poured out of the box as Mr. Copeland screamed in horror. Their son said he loved that dog so much that he wanted to have a part of her forever, so he dug up the body, cut off its head with a tiny kitchen knife, and stuffed it in the safe that was found by the mother later on that same day. Number 8. Some people like to take their work home with them, but Dr. Michael Birkland, a former medical examiner, took his work to his storage unit in Pensacola. And when I say work, I'm talking about body parts for more than 100 people. All this creepiness was discovered in August 2012 when some poor soul bought the contents of Dr. Birkland's unit at a storage auction. It seems that Dr. Birkland's hobby included the storing of 10 brains as well as other body parts like lungs, hearts, and tissue samples. Dr. Birkland was thrifty as well as creepy, keeping a heart stored in a styrofoam cup. Police noted that formaldehyde was leaking from the cracked lid. The body parts, which were harvested during private autopsies performed inside funeral homes in Florida, were also found inside Tupperware containers, trash bags, and specimen cups. Interestingly, Dr. Birkland was fired from his job as a medical examiner in 2003 for failing to complete autopsy reports in a timely manner and for keeping a big backlog of cases. Number 7. Unit B8 in U-Store Self-Storage in Clearwater, Florida, held something that couldn't be auctioned off when the family fell behind on payments in January of 2012. When the storage facility manager told the family that the contents were going to be sold, the truth came out. Among the banana boxes and old TVs rested the grandma's skeletal remains. Authorities identified the grandma as Anne Bunch, born on January 1st, 1900. Since the woman's death in 1995, her remains had been stored inside a painted blue coffin in a storage unit that wasn't air-conditioned. For 17 years, her remains rested inside a warm storage unit. The body had been properly prepared for burial by a funeral home in Alabama, which explains the lack of odor. Number 6. A lot of people refuse to go to public pools, and maybe this will be one more reason. An elderly man named Jacob Pastor, who swam in a public pool in Colorado, used the same locker in the changing room every time he visited. A lot of the lockers went unused, as most people didn't even need to use them, and it wasn't a very crowded pool to begin with. One unfortunate day, however, perhaps he had tired himself out a little too much and opened the wrong locker, the one right next to his usual one. The skeletal remains of a human fell out from the locker almost as if it were tackling him to the ground. By the looks of it, the body that once was had been in there for years, as it was fully decomposed. It looked as though somebody had been forcefully jammed in there, or perhaps they simply got stuck in there themselves. That mystery will remain unsolved. Number 5. Imager user Oldswagon is a reformed thief who earns money on the side by unlocking safes for people, but little did he know that this job could lead to him helping solve a vile crime. A landlord contacted the lockmaster to help him bust into a safe that one of his tenants had left behind, but neither of them were prepared for what was lurking inside. Once Oldswagon had disabled the lock by hot wiring it, the safe swung open and revealed that things would have gone very differently if he had used an acetylene torch to bust through the door, because inside, as pictured, they found a live grenade. Unfortunately, the live grenade was one of the more innocent items concealed within the safe's near impenetrable metal walls. The SD cards pictured were all filled with child pornography, and the journal was so depraved that Oldswagon wrote, "I thumbed through it, and I won't tell you what was in it so that you could actually sleep tonight." The authorities were informed of the upsetting material, and all of the items pictured were confiscated to help find the perpetrator, who is believed to have been running a child pornography ring. Number 4. In Fort Collins, Colorado, 1987, a school locker was searched after the murder of a local girl named Peggy Hetrick, and the police never forgot what they found. Timothy Lee Masters' locker was crammed full of over 2,200 pages of violent writings and horrific drawings of mutilated bodies, with some of them resembling the scene where Hetrick was murdered. The 15-year-old pupil was found guilty at trial and sentenced to life imprisonment, but he was eventually acquitted in 2008 when advances in forensic science cleared him of acting out his sick fantasies in real life. Peggy Hetrick's killer has never been caught. Number 3. When Mr. Shannon Wisnett bought a barbecue smoker from an auction storage unit, it contained a human leg. The severed limb was wrapped in tinfoil, but when police traced its owner, the leg's origins turned out to be distinctly less murderous than they were expecting. The former owner of the storage unit, Mr. John Wood, was involved in a plane crash in 2004. That meant his leg had to be amputated below the knee. He opted to keep the limb so he could be buried with it, but somehow forgot that he had put it in storage. Number 2. When she was refurbishing a derelict home, Ann Contola discovered a wall safe hidden behind the plasterwork. Convinced it might hold something of value, she called the locksmith to crack it open. But instead of riches, she was greeted with a handful of human teeth. Number 1. Reddit user by the name of Lumberjack found a bizarre hidden crawlspace in his house, but it was the locked safe within that contained the most spine-chilling material. The tiny place designed to fit a water heater was carpeted and led to a mysterious black door that was locked. In order to be able to sleep in the house ever again, Lumberjack broke through the door and was greeted by a black sentry safe that was looming in the corner. When the safe was opened, it contained numerous VHS tapes that didn't seem to contain innocent home movies. "No, no, no, no" could be found written on one of the tapes. As if that weren't bad enough, there was also a chilling note in ominous dripping black ink, saying, "Save yourself." 8 months ago, Lumberjack told the Reddit community that he had turned in the tapes to the police.
The man you're looking at is 56-year-old Stephen Groves. For 2 whole years, Groves has been harassing his disabled neighbor Stephen Persad and his caretakers. The harassment has been caught on Persad's Ring doorbell camera multiple times. In some clips, he's seen taking a screwdriver to the device trying to clip its wires. In another clip, he's seen scrawling on the lens with a marker to no effect. And in these instances, whacking the device with a hammer or broom handle. The reason behind the man's attacks on his neighbor's property are unknown. Over the past 6 months, Groves has been convicted of 3 charges of harassment against Persad, and has been put on a curfew and ordered to pay compensation for damages to Persad's property. Stephen Persad's niece is terrified for her uncle, having stated this is affecting her mental health, and she's scared that Groves may have intentions to harm her uncle. The restraining order that was put into place is clearly having no effect, as Groves is still harassing Persad. On top of the restraining order, Groves has been put on an electric tag for the better part of a year, and was also ordered 20 weeks of rehabilitation. Police don't seem to be able or willing to do anything more to help, considering this has already been taken to court, and Groves has been convicted multiple times, leaving Persad in a very vulnerable spot. The crazy can be seen in this man's eyes, and it's understandable for Persad and his niece to be losing sleep over this. as this is a clearly dangerous, unstable man who may escalate from just attacking Prasad's property to actually attacking him. This next video was recorded in an unknown area at a late hour in the night. Two hooded, suspicious-looking individuals, one wearing a mask, approach a man's front door, and when he answers, the woman pretends that her car broke down and she needs to borrow a phone.
Hello, do y'all have a phone I can use? My car broke down and y'all's the only one that got a light on.
We don't.
You don't?
Sorry.
The man's first mistake is opening the door at this hour to two hooded individuals, being that his Ring camera would have allowed him to check who's at the door before opening it. Instead of opening the door, if he felt the need to respond to the people at his front door, he could have and should have used the voice feature on his Ring device to ask who they were and what they need. Instead, the man opens the door, and while admittedly he knew better than to agree to let them use a phone,
We don't.
You don't?
Sorry.
opening the door in the first place was a mistake, as the man in the yellow hoodie and mask took the opportunity to rush the door with a gun after taking one last look to the right to check for witnesses. Luckily, the homeowner slammed the door shut just in time, and the two would-be assailants fled the scene. In this case, the homeowner saved himself from robbery and danger just by the skin of his teeth, and hopefully learned to check who's at his door before answering. If you've seen any of my other videos about doorbell camera footage, then you'd know the importance of checking your surroundings before unlocking and opening your door, especially depending on the area in which you live. In this video taken by the Ring doorbell camera of TikToker Jojo Ramirez, you see just how close she and her child were from danger, and how the only thing between her and a creepy man was her front door, which she locked with only seconds to spare. "Who is that? Get out of here."
Who is that? Get out of here!
She then exclaims to her son, "There's a guy outside, look."
There's a guy outside! Look!
As Jojo shouts for him to leave, he backs up, but boldly continues firmly standing in front of the door with his haunting blank expression, not saying a word. The man came out of nowhere so quickly that it could be that he was following them for a while, or perhaps was waiting for them to return. It's anybody's guess what would have happened if the door wasn't locked in time, but a pretty strong assumption would be the man was after Daniel, Jojo's young son. This footage was viewer submitted, and it was taken by their Ring doorbell in a nice, otherwise quiet neighborhood in the Netherlands. The viewer was in bed on an ordinary night when he heard noises on the roof. Thinking it could have been an animal, he ignored it and went to sleep. The next morning, this was the footage he found after seeing the notifications from his Ring doorbell from the night before. In the video are 3, maybe 4 young men trespassing on his property, 2 of them climbing the roof, while the other of the 3 who were visible, whispering to 1 or more people out of view of the camera. Luckily, this was a cold night and all the windows in the house were closed, because it was clear they were trying to burglarize the house when scratch marks were found on 2 of the upstairs windows, as if someone was attempting to lift them open. Given that there were 3 or 4 of them, they could have posed a serious threat if they were to have entered the home. After viewing the video, the viewer made sure to keep his windows all locked the following nights, and a few nights later, he woke up to the sound of someone attempting to open a downstairs window, this time not caught by the Ring camera. The footage was submitted to the police in hopes that they could identify them based on their faces. I was asked to blur their faces by the viewer, just so that if any of the perpetrators were to see this video, they wouldn't come back to the house again for any type of revenge. This one is perhaps one of the simpler yet scarier clips caught by a doorbell camera, despite how quick it is. Not many details are known, like where this took place, but this was uploaded by the neighbor of the owner of the Ring camera. In the video, we see in the dead of night a masked, young-looking man approach the front door of a house with a gun in his hand, stand there for only a few seconds, clearly contemplating what he was about to do, then backing out probably in fear and leaving. The owner of the house didn't know who this was, but this was probably a person working up to an armed robbery, possibly having his sights specifically on this house. Of course, without all the details, that's just speculation, and there could be a whole lot of other explanations as to what's going on here. However, regardless, the chances of this guy or any other person with a gun coming back shouldn't be taken lightly, and that kind of footage should be submitted to the police immediately. Randonautica is an app that uses a random number generator and location settings to create coordinates for users to explore in their local areas. The app was released in February 2020 and became especially popular during the COVID lockdowns. People would often document their findings through video and post them online. Sometimes people find downright creepy things or places, or even find themselves at the scene of a crime. A viewer named David sent me this first story and footage. It was August of 2020. The weather had been good, and so he and a friend decided to use Randonautica out of boredom. They generated 4 anomalies in total, since the first 3 were in someone's backyard or inaccessible locations. In the app, anomalies are points that can be either attractors or voids. Attractors are clusters of random points that are very dense, while voids are clusters with a very low density. The 4th anomaly looked promising, and so the 2 friends drove there. You can see on the screen the street they drove down, followed by the small path they went down after parking. The anomaly had a radius of 470 meters, so it was a fairly big area, but they didn't have to look around for long before making a bizarre and honestly creepy discovery. This is a photograph of the path they walked down, and as they walked down, they stumbled across a note stuck through a stick. On the outside of it, it read, "Write down your cell phone number." When folded open, it read, "I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me your mail address and I will send you it," with what it is referring to remaining unclear.
So you can see, first of all, it says, write down your cell phone number. When you fold it open, ich kann dir eine Handynummer geben oder sogar eine E-Mail-Adresse. Gib mir eine Mailadresse und ich sende es dir. So it says somewhere along the lines, I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me an email address and I'll send it to you. So yeah, that was just hanging on this tree here, on this branch, this piece of paper. I'm gonna put it back.
He ended up writing his number on the note and putting it back on the stick. Right next to the note were a bunch of bras lined up on a fallen tree branch with no explanation.
So yeah, that's a bunch of bras. In total, 1, 2, 3, 4, behind there, 5, 6. There are more.
These items couldn't have been left there for more than a few days, as they were discovered on the 6th of August, and the last rainfall was 3 days earlier, yet the piece of paper showed no signs of ever having gotten wet. Among some of the other things that the friends found at the scene were 2 packages of condoms and a pot that was seemingly used for a fire. The friends returned the next day on the 7th, and the note where he wrote down his number was gone. A few days later, he got a text from an unknown number just saying hi. He answered saying, "Hi, who is this?" The number then replied his address, and at this point he blocked the number. Whatever or whoever this little scene was meant for remains a mystery. This following footage, posted online by Taylor Vasquez, documents her disturbing findings when also using Randonautica. She downloaded the app and generated a location not far from her house. The location turns out to be an abandoned creek-looking area.
So I keep seeing that randonut thing all over TikTok and I really want to try it out. So I just downloaded the app and I found a location that's like 1.5 miles by my house. So I'm going to go check it out and see if I can see.
Nothing seems out of the ordinary at first, and it seems like a typical random location the app could lead somebody to, until she finds a series of disturbing drawings, seemingly done by a child.
Pretty creepy. I'll go see what that is. Okay, so I just opened up one of the photos and it's whatever the fuck that is. Then we have these random 3. This one's a "It's Your Birthday" with the snowman with, I don't know. And these two I just put together. It's like, play with me. Alright, I think it was just my imagination. I think I'm just hearing shit.
As she's analyzing the drawings, she suddenly hears an unsettling sound.
Play with me.
It sounds like the voice of a young child, but the video cuts here. On a later date, Taylor returns to the creek, but this time there are new drawings that weren't there last time. According to her, these ones being even creepier than the previous series of drawings, with one of the drawings being a sigil of Baphomet. As she's distracted by the drawings, the voice of a child can once again be heard in the background.
If they have messages on them, because then, like, those look like symbols.
At first she doesn't seem to hear it, but once she does, she makes a dash for it and the video cuts.
I don't really see anything else, so like...
After uploading the video to TikTok, a viewer pointed out what appears to be the face of a young child peering from behind a tree.
No one was with me, and tell me if you guys think that looks like a ghost child, because I don't know.
Taylor uploads another video analyzing a journal she picked up from the creek, with each page revealing another unsettling message. Taylor returns to the creek one last time, and finds not only a Ouija board made out of a piece of cardboard, but also a large knife sitting next to it. This was the last time Taylor dared to return to the creek, and so whatever was going on here will remain a mystery. As with many things posted on the internet, there's no 100% proof that this whole series of videos weren't staged. However, there were certain aspects of the videos that viewers feel make them feel more realistic, mainly the weathered-looking pieces of paper that contain the drawings, along with the disturbing image of the child's face in the video. Whether or not this was genuine is really up to the viewer to decide. This story was sent by viewer Davey S. One night as she was scrolling through TikTok, she came across a story about a few teenagers who were using Randonautica, and after following the set of coordinates they were given, reached a secluded beach area where they saw a suitcase washed up that contained something disturbing. But I'll talk more about that in a bit. Davey and her roommate Ash saw this and were determined to make their own unsettling discovery on the app. They invited 2 other friends to join them, and when they all got together, they gathered in Davey's room and figured out how to use the app. They set a radius around their current location, 29 kilometers, or around 18 to 19 miles. After hitting the button to get the location, a screen popped up telling them to set their intentions for what they want to learn and experience during the outing. The word they inputted was spooky. The location the app gave was eerily close to her house. Davey and her friends live in a rural part of Alabama on Lookout Mountain, and at the bottom of the mountain is an abandoned steel plant among a few other abandoned buildings in a lower income neighborhood. The location it gave the group of friends was 3 streets away from them. The location was on a very long road that led on for miles and miles without any other intersecting streets. The friends gathered into Davey's car with her friend Misa in the passenger seat and her friends Ash and Beck sitting in the back seat. It didn't take long for the girls to get to the street, and as Davey was about to turn left, she looked at the street sign Owl's Hollow Road. Davey's friends went from loud and excited to instantly quiet as she said, "We're here." Davey continued driving down this dark road surrounded by trees and no street lamps. It was pitch black at around 1 a.m., so the group was definitely feeling the creepiness factor kicking in. As they approached the destination, Davey pulled to the side of the road. At this point, all 3 of Davey's friends were becoming apprehensive about the whole thing, as they saw a very dark trail that led into the woods. The 4 friends sat in the car for a few minutes and laughed nervously about whether they should go through with this or not, but they all felt uneasy. The group started to agree that it felt like they were being watched. Despite being in a locked car, they felt vulnerable being alone with just a dying phone and a switchblade, so they all agreed to leave, and they pulled off further down the road. They kept driving, exploring this narrow road, and there was nothing but trees and the occasional street lamp. Davey was getting tired and decided to just do a 3-point turn on the very narrow road and go back home. There was a sense of relief until the group realized they had to pass the trail again. As they passed it, Davey looked in her rearview mirror and saw what seemed to be a hooded male figure standing in front of the trail. She pressed the gas even harder, but she didn't tell her friends what she saw because she didn't want to scare them. The friends briefly talked about that night before going to sleep around 2 a.m. The next morning, Beck went home and Davey took Ash to work. Misa decided to hang out with Davey for a little longer before she had to be home in a few hours. They discussed going back to the trail since it was daylight and they felt a bit more comfortable. They made their way back to the trail and got out of the car, this time with keys and phone in one hand and pocket knife in the other. As they walked up the trail, they realized it led uphill, something they didn't notice the night before because it was so dark. They started to feel like something was off, like they were being watched again. They made it to the top of the trail, which led to a clearing, almost like a dump site as she described it. There were tires, fast food garbage, household items, etc. The two started looking around some more and came across a bunch of mattresses scattered throughout the clearing. The disturbing part was the mattresses were made beds. Pillows, blankets, sheets, all that you'd expect on a made bed. The sight was so unsettling that the two friends agreed to leave. They hurried back downhill towards the car, and about halfway, Misa stopped in front of Davy and pointed into the woods and said, "What is that?" as she spotted a red cooler in a small ditch, something they hadn't seen on the way uphill. They stepped down into the ditch to examine it, and as they walked over to it, all the two friends could smell was the stench of something rotting. Upon looking around the surrounding area, she spotted a dead cat carcass lying a few meters away. Avoiding getting too close to the dead carcass, she grabbed a big stick and tilted the cooler upright, which had a bit of weight to it, making it difficult. Something could be heard sloshing around inside of it like it was full of ice. She shoved the stick into the top of it and opened it slightly, and when it opened, a gust of hot, moist, putrid air hit Davy in the face. Bugs and maggots immediately started coming out of the cooler, along with a horrid smell of decaying overpowering the smell of the cat. Upon opening it a little more, what she saw was a wad of wet, matted black hair. Davy ran back to Misa and yelled to get in the car. The two sped down the road as Misa frantically asked Davy what was in the cooler, but she couldn't open her mouth in fear of puking. After driving a little ways up the road, hoping to find a driveway to assist in turning around, Davy eventually gave up and did another really tight three-point turn on the narrow road, but the two would have to pass the trail one more time. As they did, Davy noticed some pieces of wood in the road that had not been there before. She looked around and saw the same hooded male figure from the night before, standing in the woods. She drove her car over the pieces of wood, damaging the bottom of her front bumper, and then sped off back home. She and her friend returned to the trail one more time since this incident to record the trail, which was the footage you've been seeing. Davy has deleted the Randonautica app and not used it since. Earlier I had mentioned that there was a video that inspired Davy and her friends to try the app themselves. That video was filmed by a couple TikTok users, who each posted their own angles of the video.
Guys, we found a suitcase at the
Gabby, go. I'll hold your stuff. I don't know.
Bro. Wait, open it.
Like, we're gonna find nothing.
Open it.
It's sweet.
It stinks, y'all.
It washed out. It's sweet.
Oh. Oh. Okay, so she's calling the police so we can see if it's actually a dead body or it's just food.
Found a suitcase on the in Alpha Beach. And
Yeah, here's the crime scene.
So we just found this suitcase and we're gonna get it. Okay, so they're like opening it up with the sticks because we don't want to. Yes, there's a bag. There's a bag, like a black bag in there.
The Randonautica app generated a location that led them to a rocky breakwall below a jetty at the shore of Alki Beach in West Seattle, when they found a mysterious black suitcase washed up on a bunch of rocks under the bridge. As they approached the suitcase, they realized there was a foul odor emitting from the suitcase, and the contents of the suitcase may be more disturbing than they had initially thought. The teens called the police, but with Seattle police response times being notoriously slow, the police took 3 to 4 hours to show up, and by that time, the tide had risen enough to where the suitcase had washed away. It took a scuba team to retrieve the suitcase and its contents. The contents were indeed quite disturbing. The remains of a couple, Jessica Lewis, who was 35, and Austin Wenner, who was 27, were found inside of the black garbage bag inside the suitcase. Their murderer was their landlord, Michael Dudley, who the pair had previously argued with regarding their rent payments. It was reported by neighbors that on the night of the pair's murder, a male voice could be heard screaming, "Please don't do this, just let me leave," before gunshots were fired, and this was reportedly 10 days before the suitcase was found. The videos had eventually been taken down by the teens. With so many people using an app that's designed to send you to randomly generated places, it's inevitable that sometimes people are going to run into some horrific things that they were not supposed to find. So if you do use the app or anything like it, it's best to just stay alert to your surroundings. It's crazy to think how Cheryl Bradshaw's gut instincts that something was off about Rodney probably saved her life. One person on the stage was not who he seemed, and his name was Rodney Alcala, a serial killer who was introduced as Bachelor Number 1, a successful photographer.
Will that date be Bachelor Number 1, Bachelor Number 2, or Bachelor Number 3? Who gets the dates?
Well, I like bananas, so I'll take one.
Investigators estimated his victims could be as many as 130, but Alcala had fled and enrolled in the NYU Film School using the name John Berger. With his good looks and charm, he persuaded many young women to pose in photographs for him, most of whom are presumed to have been victims of his, and apparently a lot of them remain unidentified. Somehow Alcala was able to make it on the dating show despite his criminal history.
She said, Ellen, I can't go out with this guy. There's weird vibes that are coming off of him. He's very strange. I'm not comfortable. Is that going to be a problem?
In 2014, a man named Ethan and his wife Danny were spending a weekend together on Vancouver Island, which they had done many times before. The couple has a lot of experience on the island and just camping in general. Vancouver Island provides an optimal camping setting because of its mix of scenic beaches and dense forest. The couple had many successful camping trips on the island, until something truly terrifying happened to them on their final outing on the island. Ethan and Danny were far from any roads or civilization, enjoying the solitude. They set up camp on a beach a good distance from anywhere and kept a fire going. To get to the trail leaving the beach was 1 kilometer along the beach and 2 kilometers to the road through the forest. The couple had met another camper named Leon from New Zealand, who they ran into earlier that day on the beach. Leon was planning on sleeping in his van, which he parked back up on the road. The couple invited him down to the beach for a fire, and the three shared a bottle of wine, talking amongst themselves around the fire. This is where things started to get a little creepy. The sun was starting to go down by this point, and the trio kept hearing what sounded like female voices from behind them in the bushes dividing the beach from the forest. It wasn't too dark out yet though, so it was still possible that they were just other hikers or campers nearby, or even a group who anchored offshore and the sound was just bouncing in a weird way. All three of them could agree that they were hearing female voices though. On that note, it was getting late and a little dark, so Leon said goodbye and set out to hike back to his car before it was too dark. Ethan and Danny stayed by their campsite and stoked the fire because Danny was starting to get creeped out by the voices, which continued on into the darkness. It sounded like two female voices speaking, but whatever that was being said was unintelligible. It sounded to the couple like the voices were not far beyond the tree line now. They stayed up very late tending to the fire, and only when the voices had finally stopped, they decided to put out the fire and go to sleep in the tent. Before doing so, the two had scanned the cove with a flashlight several times looking for boats that could have been the source of the talking, but there was nothing in sight. It was around 3 a.m. when they laid down finally, ready to catch some shut-eye. But about 15 minutes after they laid down, Ethan and Danny heard footsteps in the area around their campsite, over by where the fire was. They came from the direction of the bushes toward the inland behind them, a direction that was not traversable by people. The couple lay there, hoping it was just a bear or any animal, because the only bears on the island are black bears, which usually are very timid around people. The footsteps went from the fire, then over to the tent, then back into the woods. 5 minutes later, the footsteps came back again to the fire, and now, clear as day, there were two female voices talking gibberish very loudly. Their communication was not resembling any languages known to Ethan or Danny, and they seemed to be talking over each other, having what could barely be considered to be a conversation at full volume in the dead of night very far away from civilization without using lights to navigate through the dense brush relatively quietly in a direction that seemed impossible to traverse on foot. The two voices moved from the fire pit area over to the tent, still talking at a loud volume. They stood over the tent talking for a few seconds, then went completely dead as night silent. They went back into the woods to never be seen or heard again. Ethan and Danny lay there completely frozen and afraid for a long time. They woke up around 11 a.m. the next day because of how late they fell asleep. They packed up first thing and never returned. The couple probably made the best decision to remain quiet in the tent, not drawing attention to themselves from whoever or whatever was outside the tent. The following pictures you're about to see were taken by hikers Kylie Cashwell and John Stone, who both live in Eagle Mountain, Utah, a small town south of Salt Lake City. For the past few years, they had been exploring forests in search of interesting things, and one day they found it. One day Kylie was hiking in Cedar Fort, just 5 miles south of Salt Lake City. While hiking, she found large amounts of animal bones and piles of junk people had dumped. But things started to get strange when she started coming across strange symbols and animal parts scattered throughout the forest, some of them in weird formations. On September 15th, she decided to bring her friend Josh along with her to show him in person the unusual things she was finding. This time, the two came across something even more disturbing. On the trail, there was a severed deer head and a pentagram surrounded by deer legs, which were not there the first time Kylie walked the trail. The sun was going down, and after getting their pictures, they agreed it was time to head back to the car. But the more they walked, they realized they didn't recognize the path they were on. So the two start looking around for anything that could refresh their memory of where they were. But as it got dark out, the two accepted that they were lost. With nothing but their phone flashlights to navigate, they started getting the feeling they were being watched. As they picked up their pace, the two started to hear the trees and bushes moving at least 20 feet to their right, made more concerning by the fact that there was no wind that night. The two started to panic and hurried onto a trail they found, hoping it would take them back to Kylie's car. Just when things couldn't seem to get any worse, Kylie and Josh heard a scream so deep and horrific that it sounded neither human nor animal. The two sprinted down the trail, Kylie making a conscious effort not to look back, but Josh did. And Josh claimed to see a large black figure on the trail behind them, too big to be a human. The two made it to the car by some stroke of luck, losing whatever was chasing them. So they left the forest and went straight home. Upon doing research, Kylie found documents of common cult practices reported in those woods, as well as numerous murders and disappearances that happened in the area throughout the years. Like Ethan and Danny in the first story, Kylie has not returned since. Deep in the woods in northern Germany, two friends were hiking in an area formerly territory of the German Democratic Republic when they came across these strange periscope-like pipes protruding from the ground. Feeling either brave or foolish, they decided to investigate further. They discovered a doorway hidden behind several bushes, covered by a large wooden lid. What they found hidden beneath the ground is a pretty disturbing piece of history. The doorway led to a huge abandoned army bunker. There were several tunnels leading off in different directions, which intersected a long central corridor. There were so many different directions to go that exploring the place felt like going through a maze to the two friends. They tried not to stray far away from each other in fear of getting lost. That's how big the place was. As they ventured deeper into the structure, they came across German writing on the wall, which translated to "help." Curiosity still got the better of them, and they continued deeper into the bunker. And as they did, the structure became more and more decayed. More writings were found on the walls, this time reading, "Hello Satan, I love you." Some of the rooms and corridors were flooded and smelled like sewage. They made their way into a very large room with a strange machine in the center. It's very possible the previous occupants had fled the bunker in a hurry, as there was a single shoe still stuck in the sludge on the floor. Why wouldn't someone have time to grab one shoe unless they were in a hurry? The structure was believed to be an old military bunker, possibly used for shelter by the Nazis during World War II. But why did the soldiers seemingly leave in such a hurry? And whether they were the ones who had written the warning messages on the walls is unknown. In this last story, for the person's safety, I'll refer to him as just Bill. Bill is an avid hiker who in 2016 was visiting his brother upstate New York near Downsville. Bill's brother owns a small house and a barn up there, and from time to time Bill and other family members would go up to visit. This was in the late fall, and so the foliage was already mostly orange, and more than half of the leaves had fallen off the trees. Bill was hiking a narrow trail which was not far from his brother's place. This trail is in the middle of a very rural area, and it connects from the occasional property to property. So when Bill stumbled across a duffel bag on the ground in the middle of the woods, it was a surprise. The duffel bag looked like it was relatively new. It didn't look dirty as if it had been sitting in the woods for an extended period of time. There was a foul odor emanating from the bag, however, like something rotting inside. Bill assumed the worst, but he knew he had to open the bag to see what's inside in case it actually could have been a person. He was building up the courage to open the zipper to the bag, but before he could, he heard footsteps approaching from off the trail and a voice saying, "That's mine, please don't touch it." A large man in a dirty jacket and jeans was quickly approaching from the woods and grabbed the duffel bag off the ground. The two exchanged looks for a moment. Bill told the man he assumed the bag was forgotten by someone, and the man told him he was storing his kill from his hunt in the bag. Even though Bill isn't a hunter, he knew it's standard to use a cooler for storing fresh kill, not a duffel bag of all things. This also wouldn't explain the foul smell so soon, as usually dead bodies only start to smell after a few days, not right after death. So he apologized and continued walking down the trail, with a little more speed in his step. It's likely the man noticed Bill's nervousness, because he heard the duffel bag get dropped on the floor as he was walking away, but as he looked back, he didn't see the man anymore. Bill nervously continued along the trail, taking out his phone to try to call his brother for an emergency pickup by the road, but he didn't have any reception in the woods. All he could do was press forward and avoid crossing paths with that man again. But as he continued on, he kept hearing leaves crunching from not far behind him, and any time he'd look back, the coast seemed clear. But eventually, his fear that he was being followed became real. He saw that man following him in the distance in a stalkerish manner, hiding behind a tree. Without thinking, Bill started to run as fast as he could down the trail. He knew he was being followed without even looking back because he could hear the leaves being crushed from not too far behind him. Bill came to an abandoned-looking property with overgrown grass, and having grown too winded to continue running, he attempted entry to the old house through the back door, and was able to get inside. Bill hid under a cot in the first bedroom he found, and he heard the back door open again, followed by heavy footsteps moving in a hurry. They went from room to room, and Bill could hear the man's heavy breathing from also being out of breath. The man's footsteps came into the bedroom just for a second and left right after. He didn't look under either of the two cots. Bill heard the back door to the house open and slam shut again, but he laid under the cot for another half an hour, not taking any risks. He only got up when he realized it would be dark soon, and he needed to get to a road to call for help. He proceeded to leave the house and run down the dirt trail by the house that was most likely once used as a driveway, which led him to a road. From here, he eventually hitched a ride with a passing car, who gave Bill a lift back to his brother's house, where Bill would call the local police department and report his encounter. Given the severity of the case, police would show up to the house to get a more detailed description of the man's face, the location it happened, and other information. Though it was never technically confirmed what was in that duffel bag, the rotting smell would already be clue enough. But the fact that the man so intently chased after Bill shows that he was hiding something that he didn't want any witnesses for, most likely dumping a dead body. Snapchat has become a staple in today's social media world. It's a convenient way to contact friends and keep in touch with people. But as we've seen over and over on this channel, there can be a few privacy concerns if you're not careful. Let's just jump right into it and look at 3 disturbing snaps people have received and their backstories. For the sake of the person who sent me this, I'll refer to her as Maria. Maria has an Instagram account with 5,000 followers, which is a decent amount, and so she gets a good amount of attention on her profile from men. Maria has a boyfriend who has not appeared in any pictures of hers on her Instagram. Maria also had her Snapchat username in her Instagram bio, something a lot of people do to allow their acquaintances and friends to add them on the app with ease. This can also open the door to unwanted contact, though. Although she didn't add everybody back who added her on Snap, she at one point had her privacy settings set to allow all people to send her messages and snaps, even people she didn't add back. So, somewhat often she'd receive messages and snaps from random guys, usually guys that followed her on Instagram. In her words, often older and creepy looking. But according to her, even younger guys manage to look creepy by taking weird angled selfies in dark rooms. Usually the snaps were pretty harmless like this, but one day she received a snap that would lead to her getting the police involved. Maria lives with her family, but often stays at her boyfriend's first-floor apartment. This location is not known to anybody except for her close friends who know of her boyfriend, making it all the more disturbing when she received this snap. It was a picture taken through the window to her boyfriend's bedroom. At the time the photo was taken, it's hard to see it in the dark, but Maria was in the bed napping, and her boyfriend was in the living room watching football. There was no caption to the Snapchat, making it appear to be some kind of subtle threat. Maria didn't open the snap until much later in the night while going through snaps she'd received from various people she didn't know. By this time, it was a couple hours after the snap had been sent. She panicked and screenshotted the snap and showed it to her boyfriend. From here, he replied to the account on her phone, asking who is this. Upon adding the person back, they saw the account had a pretty high snap score, which for those of you who may not know, a person's snap score represents how many times they have received or sent a snap. This account having a snap score in the 50,000 range meant it wasn't likely just a random spam account. The person replied, "John, LOL." Maria's boyfriend replied back, "We're calling the police," and John replied, "K cool, let me know if you need help calling them." After this, the account blocked her, and the couple were left to wonder who this person was. A search through Maria's Instagram followers turned up multiple Johns, but with no last name on the account, it would simply be a guess as to who it could be. That same night, as the couple was sleeping, a crash from the living room woke them up. As Maria's boyfriend ran to check the source of the noise, he found it was the dining room window, which had been shattered, and on the floor was a house brick, presumed to have been taken from a house being renovated down the block. If the couple didn't have a case before, they definitely did now, and they called 911 to report the incident. Now that a police report had been made, police would subpoena Snapchat for information on this person's account in hopes to locate the person. The couple was assigned a detective to their case who was supposed to help in identifying the mystery person. However, as the days turned into weeks, little to no information was given. It did become apparent, however, that the Snapchat account had been either deleted or banned because it no longer came up under search results. Currently, Maria and her boyfriend have no idea who this person was, and any thought of it being a prank by a friend was out the window when their window was literally shattered by a brick. It can boil down to a stalker being jealous of her boyfriend, but this would also mean that Maria was followed to her boyfriend's house, and that the perpetrator would know where she lives as well. Luckily, with security cameras becoming more prevalent on houses, these kinds of crimes are becoming more difficult to get away with. But in cases like this, where there's an absence of any cameras, unfortunately people may still be able to pull these kinds of crimes off. 3 months later, and Maria and her boyfriend haven't seen any new activity at either of their homes. This next story comes from a college student named Tom from the University of Kentucky. Tom shares his location on the Snap Map feature, which if you've been around my channel for a while, you know how things can sometimes turn out with that. Tom lives in a house off campus with 4 friends in a downtown area by a bunch of bars. The squad of guys often walk to and from these bars at night on the weekends. The night in question was no exception. Tom was on his way home from a nearby college bar, about a 15-minute walk from the house. At some point while walking home, he was on a quiet residential street with woods on one side, and he heard someone walking behind him. He turned to see a man holding out something in front of him, walking about 10 meters behind him. He couldn't tell what he was holding, but he didn't stare for too long because he didn't want to draw negative attention to himself. He noted that something about the sight of the man seemed ominous, though. The man was behind Tom for a while, until he turned to the block with his house on it. At some point before making it back, the man was no longer behind him, at least not that he thought. It was only after he made it back inside the house that he got a notification that he received a snap from his friend Luke, one of his housemates, who was home at the time. Luke had lost his phone that night though, so receiving a snap from his Snapchat account meant that somebody had his phone. Tom called his housemates downstairs before opening the video. He also turned a screen recorder on to capture the snap, and this is what they saw. snap was a video of Tom walking down the street towards his house. It was the man he had seen walking behind him, and what he was holding out in front of him was apparently Luke's phone. They had the idea to check the location of Luke's phone on the snap map, since he had his location enabled, as did Tom. The location of his Bitmoji was last updated 9 minutes ago, and its location was right on top of their house. So the three guys who are currently home ran around the entire property with all the outside lights on to light up the area. They didn't find the man with the phone, but oddly enough, Luke's Bitmoji moved just a tad as it updated again, yet it was still on top of the house, meaning whoever had the phone had to be somewhere that they were overlooking. After a while, the guys thought to lock the phone using the Find My iPhone feature, and then have it play a sound. When they did this, they were confused to hear the beeping sound of the phone coming from inside the house, followed by stomping of someone's shoes and the front door slamming shut. Luke's beeping phone was still inside the house, but instead of going straight for that, the three guys ran outside to chase after whoever just ran out the front door. By the time they made it out onto the street, they had no idea which way the person went. They were out of sight and they could have been hiding anywhere. After checking the neighbors' yards, the guys went back inside to retrieve Luke's beeping phone, and Tom claims they found it right in the pantry closet, meaning the man was hiding in there for however long. At first, one could have maybe assumed that the person who had the phone was trying to return it, until it was discovered that that person was literally hiding in their house. Assuming all the details in the story are true, if I had to guess, the man who had stolen Luke's phone knew who he was somehow and was following Tom through his SnapMap Bitmoji location all the way up to their house. There are some missing details though, like how the phone was stolen, what the method of entry to the house was, and if Luke and the rest of the guys in the house had any sort of enemies or people out to get them. No police action was taken apparently. In 2015, an Australian Redditor with username Skinna555 took 3 Snapchat videos of his parents' exotic birds and put them on a Snapchat story. What followed next was downright disturbing. Skinna and his girlfriend recently moved into his childhood home with his parents while their own house was being built. Skinna's parents owned 3 Australian parrots, and one night while he was home alone, he uploaded 3 Snapchat stories showing off the birds, since many people always asked about the birds.
I'd say the first one of my parents' little birds is this little guy. It is little Leo. He's a cockatiel. The second little bird of my parents is a rainbow lorikeet. His name is Oliver. And there he is. And here I am with my good little mate, Puffin.
About 15 minutes after uploading the videos to his story, Skinna receives a text from one of his friends. And at the bottom of it, it says, "By the way, what was that in the window behind you in the last one?" So after seeing this text, he went to rewatch the clips a couple of times and opened them on his computer to get a larger and clearer view of the videos. In the last snap, it almost appears as if someone is at the door, looking in with their hands cupped against it. But it's hard to say for sure because of how briefly the door is in the frame. But whatever it was not in the first snap when that same door was in full frame. Skinna was home alone at the time, and to add to the mystery, that door led to the backyard, which was only accessible through a single gate which had been locked. The theory that it might have been a reflection doesn't hold up, because the sliding glass door was half open, and all that stood between the figure and the inside of the room was the fly screen door, which would not have been able to cast any reflections. Whatever was at that door moved in the matter of seconds that passed between the first and third snap. When Skinna was a young child, around 10, he started to commonly experience sleep paralysis, which could get so intense that he'd find himself often not being able to breathe for short periods of time. And this led to a fear of sleeping for him. A couple years went by, and his sleep paralysis tendencies would worsen. During his episodes, he could not move, and felt like something that meant him harm was in the room with him. Around the age of 14, he started to hear and see things like thuds and creaks. However, he always had one recurring vision, a faceless person looking in his bedroom window with their hands cupped up to the glass, similar to this image caught in his snap story. When he moved out at age 18, he never had another episode. So for a few days after these snaps, nothing happens. But come Friday night, Skinna found himself home alone again. At around 10:15 p.m., While playing games on Steam with his friends, he starts to hear some relatively loud banging, loud enough that he could hear it even through his headset. It was coming from the screen door outside. He got up to film the sounds using his phone. The noises got louder and more frequent. Instead of outright opening the curtains and potentially finding himself face to face with someone on the other side, he walked through the kitchen into the laundry room to turn on the outside lights. Like I mentioned earlier, there's only one entry and exit to the backyard, the left side of the house through a locked gate. So with the back lights now on, he went over to a window that looks out to that one exit of the backyard. While waiting and expecting to see someone rushing out of the yard, a loud noise can be heard from outside on the opposite side of the house. He aims the camera at the window for a few moments, then turns on the kitchen lights, and seconds later stops recording.
What the fuck, man?
He kept all the lights on until his parents returned home. He uploaded the videos to Reddit, and people started to help in examining the videos. After a few Redditors enhanced the videos, a big mass in the corner was revealed in the dining room. The figure begins to resemble a person. And to make it creepier, that figure is not there at the end of the video. Skinner called the police, and the video freaked even them out. They believed that a two-man team tried to rob his parents while they were away. Theoretically, when one would-be robber broke in and realized Skinner was home, the second one tried to make noise to lure him inside. And when it didn't work, he snuck out and escaped. Skinner doesn't entirely trust this theory, mainly because all the doors and windows were locked from the inside when they came in. So how exactly would these guys have gotten in? Years later, this just remains to be another internet mystery, and what actually went down, we may never know. Marissa came to the horrible realization that somebody else was in the house with her using John's phone. Were a bunch of texts from her son John. "Can you come pick me up? I think I injured my elbow." She checked where her son's iPhone was located. She saw John's location was at the house, not at this random intersection. She went and called her other son Kevin, who was also still out. Kevin picked up his phone. When asked if Kevin was with John, he said yes, and John said "Hi Mom" into the phone. I once booked an Airbnb by myself in an area in Arizona that I had a job interview. Since it was so far from home, I made a short trip out of it. I went with this one specific Airbnb because it was much cheaper than any hotels I could find. It was about half an hour away from where I'd be interviewing for, which was fine with me. It was off some dead-end, secluded road, and it had a nice view of the desert in the backyard. I brought my laptop with me to get work done at my at-the-time current job during the day, so that kept me busy most of the days I was there. I stayed for 3 days. My interview was on the second day that I was there, which was a Tuesday. I would be leaving Friday, so on Monday, the night before my interview, I was practicing interview questions for this specific company, and just generally getting some last-minute knowledge on their firm. I was doing this on my laptop in the living room of the little house, probably around 9 p.m., when there was a tap at the window. I say tap because it wasn't exactly a knock. It sounded more like it could have been someone's finger. My head, of course, swung to the left to look at the window in reaction. I didn't see anyone, but it was also pitch black outside. I was kind of scared to look out the window, but I had to be a man and just do it. And there was no one as far as the eye could see. Just darkness. Of course, maybe it could have been a bug hitting the window. We've got some pretty nasty bugs here after all. The next day, I got through my interview and thought I did pretty well. So for the rest of my little trip there, I explored different parts of the town in my car, ate at different restaurants, and sat in the backyard and relaxed in the sun. Little did I know, I was likely being watched while I was in the backyard. That night, I was inside watching Breaking Bad on Netflix when it happened again. A single tap at the window. Now it was obvious it wasn't a bug. I was even more disturbed now, but once again rushed to the window. Even though I saw no one, that didn't mean someone wasn't out there. I checked the windows by the front door, then opened the door and looked outside for a second. Since there was no one there, I went back inside and then went to the back door. I stepped outside onto the back porch and looked out to the desert behind the house. Silence and darkness. And then I heard a click. A sound someone made, like clicking their tongue at the roof of their mouth. It was off in the distance, beyond the light from the house. It was out somewhere in that cold desert. I felt as though someone could be hiding behind any number of those bushes, watching me and toying with me. I yelled out, and almost as if they did it in response, there was another click. I pinpointed the direction it came from and looked that way. I could see someone now, standing not too far away, dressed in dark clothes, blending into the darkness of the desert. I started walking a little closer, then stopped, realizing I didn't want to get any closer to that person. I called out, "You're on private property. I'm gonna call the cops if you don't leave." And I saw the person eerily quickly walk away. I theorized it was the Airbnb owner, but obviously that was a stretch and I didn't really know what to actually think. The night following, I was in my bed on my laptop watching Breaking Bad again before going to bed. I think I watched 2 episodes, so I was doing this for about an hour and a half. I didn't hear any noises in the house, though I was definitely giving thought to that encounter from earlier while watching the show. When I finally turned off the light in the room and tried to fall asleep, within 10 seconds, there was a click sound again, muffled from the inside of the closet. I looked at the closet door, which was open just a crack. Then, a pretty natural response, I sprang off the bed, still in my PJs, and ran to the car. I sat in the driveway with the car running, and I called 911. I stared at the house as I spoke to the dispatcher, waiting to see if someone would come out, because all of my stuff was still in there. A police car arrived, and upon entering the house, we did a quick investigation of the house together. It was very small with not many places to hide. Conclusively, I still packed my stuff and left that place that night for a nearby hotel. I contacted both Airbnb and the host, and I was only able to get a partial refund for my stay. I still think it may have been the host of the Airbnb. I mean, who else would have access to the house? There were no signs of forced entry, which leads me to believe whoever it was may have had a key. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a stranger who snuck in at an opportune time. My wife Cheryl and I have been together for 10 years, and we got married 2 years ago. We just got a house together not even a month ago, and things couldn't have started on a worse note. We moved to a small inland town of Georgia called Waycross. That's all the details I'm giving though, to avoid any more possible issues. We're on a quiet street with a big property that sits in front of a medium-sized patch of woods, which was one of the factors that really appealed to my wife and I. We plan to adopt a dog and raise kids here, so we wanted a big property for the dog and kids to play around on. We both work similar shifts. I get home around 5 and she gets home around 6 most of the time. The first 2 nights in the house went completely normal. It was the weekend, so we spent our entire days unpacking. It wasn't until Monday night, when we were both in bed, only having turned the lights out maybe 20 minutes ago, that outside from the backyard, there was the sound of this blasting music. Our nearest neighbors on either side were spaced out enough where we couldn't mistake music from their yards being in our yard. It was definitely in our backyard, and it wasn't party music or anything like that. It sounded like very old, static-y, vintage music. The windows were shut, so after my wife and I exchanged horrified glances at each other and wondered where the music could be coming from, I opened my window on my side of the bed, and it was much clearer. There was some song that sounded like it was from the 1940s or something blasting. I later found out after looking up the lyrics that the song name was Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf by Henry Hall. It has a slight eerie vibe to it for some reason, even though it was meant to be a happy song. But at the time of listening to it coming from our backyard, it was nothing but downright horrifying. We were still learning the house, but we figured there must be a backyard light switch downstairs. I ran downstairs to the back door and flicked the light switches next to the door, and one of them turned on the backyard lights. I didn't see anyone in the backyard. I opened the door, and the music was louder, obviously, but as I walked out into the grass, I realized it wasn't coming from the backyard, rather from the woods. The song played to completion as I was outside in the yard just standing there looking around. When the song ended, there was silence again. It seemed like someone must have been playing some stupid housewarming prank, but it wasn't appreciated. I went back to my wife and told her it was probably just some kids trying to scare the new ones in town for whatever reason. Hearing myself even say that, I realized how stupid and weird it sounded. Why would anyone do that? The next night, it happened again. A few minutes after we turned out the lights in the bedroom, music from outside started blasting. This time much louder, and the song playing was that song everyone's heard, Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Cheryl and I once again looked at each other, this time in genuine disgust and worry, because we had hoped it was just going to be a one-time thing, but it was happening again. I looked out the window, and this time I could see something on the grass. It wasn't a person, but there was definitely something out there. I told my wife I was going to check it out. She said we should just call the cops, and I said yeah, we will in a second. I went out there with this mindset that I need to establish I'm the man of the house, not just to my wife, but to whoever was thinking they could mess with us just for being the new people on the block. When I was in the yard, I saw the object in the grass was smaller than I had thought, but the blaring, creepy song was coming from it. I realized it was an old radio. I turned it off and looked up at the window at my wife who was watching, and I held it up, yelling that someone left it there to scare us with the music. What she did next was not something I expected in response to that. She started screaming my name to run inside. She kept screaming, "Run." I yelled, "Why?" And she screamed back, "There's people standing behind you." This statement made my heart skip a beat, and I turned around to face the woods. I saw 3 figures standing like 6 feet apart from each other, clearly facing my direction. They weren't running at me, they were just standing there. I yelled, "Oh shit," and ran back inside the house, slamming the door behind me. My wife was upstairs, hysterical, crying already. I told her I'd call the cops, and I did. They arrived thankfully not that long after. All the while, we were scared to hear knocks at one of the doors or windows. My wife and I desperately explained the situation to both of the police that arrived, and I showed them the radio on the ground. I asked them if they could take it back with them as evidence for prints, and told them I only touched the top part with the handle. They did take the radio. They also checked the front of the woods with their flashlights for a few minutes, probably just as a deterrent to the people in the woods to stop their behavior if they were still there. When the police left, honestly, we went right back to feeling vulnerable and scared, but thank Christ the people never returned. This was only a few weeks ago though. God forbid they came back, I'd try to get it on video. I've worked as a nurse in multiple hospitals and facilities. Before the current hospital I work at, I worked at a geriatric hospital 30 minutes from my house. I had experience working with older patients before, so this was nothing new to me. I had been working at this hospital for only a couple of weeks, and you'll soon understand why. This was on my second to last shift at this hospital, unbeknownst to me at the start of that night. I was working the graveyard shift, and I was running on negative hours of sleep. I was assigned to the Alzheimer's ward. The patients in this ward absolutely adored me. My presence as a young girl in her 20s among the residents of this ward who were otherwise left to themselves to float around in their minds, I'm sure saw me as a breath of fresh air, someone who could tie them to the now or to the everyday. If you're just left to yourself, you can mentally go to other places, but with someone else in your space, you're tied to that moment in time. I was dealing with a number of patients that night, but one was a little more restless than the others. Her name was Lena. This was my first night dealing with her, and she kept telling me anytime I'd enter her room about the voices she kept hearing and the man dressed in black she kept seeing in the corner of the room. The other lady in her room requested her curtain be closed before my shift started so that Lena would leave her alone. She was a sweet lady that smiled whenever I was around her, but she didn't say much and was very forgetful. Since I started my shift around 9 p.m., most of the patients were asleep by 11, but not Lena. Whenever she called me into the room, she'd be frightened of these alleged voices she was hearing, and the man in black that kept staring at her in the corner of the room. Not gonna lie, it was creeping me out a little. I believed that in her mind she was seeing and hearing these things, and I sympathized with her because I imagined them to be very scary. But still, I tried my best to calm her down and get her to go to sleep. I didn't want to turn on the TV to calm her down because I wanted to be courteous of the other patient in the room. I held Lena's hands and told her it's okay, to breathe and to relax. I reminded her that she wasn't here alone, and I was always just a call away. This seemed to do the trick. Lena relaxed for a while, and the next time I came in the room, she was asleep. Once most, if not all, of the patients are asleep, the night goes much slower. Time almost moves in reverse. An hour or two later, I was in the linen room stocking my cart when I heard something in the room. It was a relatively small, dead quiet room. I had the door closed too. That's why hearing another noise was weird. I turned, saw nothing, and resumed stocking my cart. Then I felt what I can only describe to be a hand on my shoulder. I looked at my shoulder, jumped, and screamed, but there was nothing on my shoulder. There was no one in the room. Yet I knew I felt something large basically grab my shoulder. I went out in the hall for a second to peek my head. No other nurses in sight. Dead quiet. I had nothing else to do but resume what I was doing. I continued stocking the cart until it was full. Then I turned to face the door. And I fell to the floor and started screaming as my heart was immediately in my throat. There was a man dressed in black standing outside the door, looking through the glass, smiling. My screams were loud enough to wake the entire ward. The man disappeared out of sight through the glass window of the door. Seconds later, the door opened and one of my fellow nurses came in to help me off the floor as I was hysterical. I asked her if she saw the man dressed in black. Her response was, "What man? There's no one else here." We checked all the rooms in the ward. There wasn't anybody dressed in black in there. My screams woke Lena from whatever light sleep she must have been in, and when I came into her room, she started talking of the voices. This time the screams, which she didn't know were my screams. I asked her what this man in black looked like, if he was smiling. And she looked at me, and I noticed her eyebrows point down, as her expression changed to look the most focused I'd seen her the entire day. She asked, "How did you know?" And even with my heart still racing, I felt it skip a beat as she said this. She started screaming now, screaming, "Get me out of here, he's coming." The other nurses came in and tried to calm her down. I was switched to a different ward that night with someone else, and I eventually ended up going home early because I was just so freaked out. I texted the head nurse the next day that my next shift would be my last, that the experience traumatized me and that I didn't really want to be in that building anymore. I got as friendly of a response as I could have hoped for. I've never been diagnosed with anything, nor have I ever dealt with hallucinations of any kind. I'm aware of the effects of lack of sleep, but this was next level. I don't know if my mind started playing tricks on me from what Lena was telling me all night, but the feeling of the hand on my shoulder, the image of the smiling man behind the glass door, matching the description a patient kept giving multiple times. This was one of those once-in-a-lifetime, unexplainable supernatural occurrences. At least, I hope it was once in a lifetime. I was driving home from work one night, taking my usual route home. I got out at midnight, so it was probably 12:15ish at this point. My town is pretty quiet and boring. A lot of woods everywhere, and not a lot of people or houses. I was on this road not far from my house with a cornfield on one side and a patch of woods on the other. It was midsummer and like 75 degrees, so I had my convertible top down. I was cruising down the street going like 50 when I heard a loud, blood-curdling woman's scream come from one side of the road, but I couldn't tell which one. I brought the car to a quick halt by slamming on the brakes and listening. There was a woman's cry from the left side, in the woods. She was crying for help. I got out of my car and grabbed the baton from my back seat. I walked towards the woods and called back, "Who's out there?" and the woman immediately called back, "Please help me." I began to run into the woods, swiping all the twigs and bushes out of my way. I yelled out to the woman to keep screaming so I could find her. She'd every 10 seconds or so scream help, and I'd approach in that direction, running, screaming back. But pretty soon, I started to realize no matter how far into the woods I went, the woman's yells didn't seem to get any closer or louder. If anything, they were always the same distance, even though I was booking it straight in the direction of the screams. I screamed out, "Tell me where you are," and about 5 seconds later, the woman once again screamed out, "Help." I stopped in my tracks now. I didn't like this. I started to feel like I was walking into some kind of trap. I turned around and started running back in the direction I came. I ran and ran until I could see the flashing headlights of my car on the side of the road beyond the trees. The whole way back, I still heard the woman's screams, but they were still the same distance no matter how much closer to my car I got, as if she were following me back. Was I being stalked? I got in my car and just drove out of there, completely freaked out. I called 911 to report it to the authorities in case they'd want to investigate it. I wasn't sticking around there though, I was tired. After telling a few friends and family about the strange encounter, I was ready to move on with my life. But a week later, I saw something on the news that made me sick to my stomach. The dead body of a 30-something-year-old woman was found in the woods by a man hiking with his dog. Oddly, there were no signs of foul play. The location that the body was reported to have been found was the same general area where I heard the screams. While that patch of woods is very big, I can't help but feel that would be a huge coincidence. Back before my girlfriend Jenny and I officially started dating, we would still hang out all the time. We both snowboard, and her family has a little cabin-type house in Vermont not far from Stowe Mountain Resort. This was around our maybe 10th time hanging out. She invited me to go up there for a weekend with her to go snowboarding for the first time together. It was like a 5-hour drive. As we neared her little house, we spent about half an hour on this very windy, secluded road on which we'd pass occasional driveways that would lead up into properties blocked off by walls of trees. We were way up there in the mountains. The sight of other cars by this point was something to behold. It really felt like we were alone up there. A lot of the driveways didn't even have tire marks in the snow, meaning even a lot of the houses were void of people. Jenny told me that's because a lot of the houses here were owned by people out of state, just like her situation. I was going like 30 when she yelled at me to slow down, it's coming up, so I hit the brakes, and this little opening in the trees that I otherwise would have missed came up. We drove this narrow trail in 4-wheel drive, which led to this small house covered in snow. It looked incredibly cozy. We parked, and first thing we did was turn the heat on in the little house. We unloaded our stuff inside, and since it was already getting dark that night, we just cooked some of the food we packed for dinner and watched a movie. Pursuit of Happiness, actually. So the house had just about everything: heat, electricity, except running water. Her family had jugs and jugs of water for important things like washing hands and plates and stuff. But there was no working toilet, so she told me we had to use the outhouse outside. I only had to go pee that night, so I just went out to the front deck and peed into the snow. It was also snowing out that night. We fell asleep at some point during the second movie we watched, and we woke up pretty early to our phone alarms. We wanted the freshies on the mountain. We started getting ready to drive up to the ski resort. After breakfast, I had to go out to the outhouse though. I ran out to the outhouse in my shoes, and my feet started to freeze. On my way to the outhouse though, I saw footprints in the snow. They were kind of big, but I couldn't tell if they were boot marks or animal prints. I followed the trail, and it actually wrapped around the house and then went into the woods. I called Jenny outside, and she came to look and said it was probably a black bear since they're everywhere up here. So I went, did my business, and we set off to the ski resort, where we had a good 8-hour run. Afterwards, we stopped at a diner to eat, and then went back to the house. By this point, it was pitch black outside and snowing again. We set up a fire and got the heat on full blast and started blasting some music. We started to drink, and eventually I had to break the seal and pee. But also, if I was throwing my boots on anyway, I figured I'd do all my business in the outhouse. I ran out into the snowstorm and to the outhouse once more. This time I slammed the door shut to prevent snow and cold air blowing in my face. I heard the blasting music from inside the house still, but then over that, I heard the crunching sound of footsteps in the snow, passing the outhouse. "Jenny?" I yelled. No answer. The footsteps just walked away. I brought my phone with me, so I just texted her, "Are you outside?" It didn't immediately deliver though, because my cell reception sucked up there. A few minutes passed and I was still in the outhouse. I was just about to finish when the blasting music suddenly stopped. It was just pure silence, minus the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground outside. As soon as I stepped out of the outhouse, I realized it was pitch black out here now. The lights from the house were off. I figured maybe the power went out. I used my phone's flashlight and noticed a fresh pair of footsteps in the snow leading to the house. I followed the footsteps to the front door, where they seemed to stop, then continue around the house. I banged on the door and yelled Jenny's name. Suddenly the door opened and an arm pulled me inside the house. It was Jenny. She slammed the door shut and locked it. She whispered that there was a man who tried to open the door, which she locked as soon as I went to the outhouse because she was scared being alone. When she saw the person at the door wasn't me, she cut the power and hid in a corner in the living room and watched in horror as a stranger walked past the living room window slowly, looking inside. I came to the door only a couple minutes after this happened. Jenny told me about the secret cellar in the floor that her dad kept a couple rifles and shotgun in. Navigating in the dark, I found the handle to it and lifted it open. Now using my flashlight, I climbed down the little ladder and grabbed one of the guns off the wall. We then waited on the couch in the dark, afraid to turn the lights back on, exposing ourselves to whoever was out there. The closest neighbors were not a short walk. Jenny said it wouldn't have been any of them, and odds are they weren't even in Vermont right now. Once again, the only sound was the sound of snowflakes hitting the ground outside, until the sickening sound of footsteps in the snow outside returned. I took the loaded gun and marched to the front door, opened it, and shot like 3 rounds into the air, screaming. The footstep sounds were gone. I'd imagine they ran off, and the sound of the shots echoing into the air masked the sound of the footsteps running away. We left the next morning under the recommendation of her father, who said it's best to not be there at the moment. They don't really have anything they're worried about being stolen, so we just got the hell out of there the next day. At least we got our full day of snowboarding in. That horrific night was definitely an experience, to say the least. My name is Howard. I'm 25 years old, and I live on my family's farm. I help take care of it when my parents are out of town. It's just a little family farm, not a commercial farm or anything like that. My parents want me to take it over when they're too old to take care of it anymore, as I'm the oldest of 3 and the only son. But honestly, I don't really want to. I don't see myself staying in the middle of Arkansas my whole life, and especially not after something really weird that happened only last July. My parents were on a romantic trip for a week, and so it was my 2 sisters, Crystal and Morgan, and I taking care of the property while they were gone. There's not much around here. Lots of privacy and such, a little too much in my opinion. Except for this one night. It started later on in the night, as it was approaching time to go to bed. My sisters do college online. Crystal takes summer courses, and so she was in her room on her laptop doing work. Morgan and I were just hanging out watching some dumb show in the living room. All 3 of us kind of want to get out of the farm lifestyle. Me especially, since I'm oldest and in the prime of my 20s. One dreaded part of farm life is the predators, though. Not just the animals that come and eat your produce, but the people that come and steal from you. Believe it or not, it happens. It hasn't happened many times to us, but it does happen. We have a few guns in the house for this exact reason. Our 2 dogs outside suddenly started going crazy in the backyard. Something spooked them for sure. I first thing went outside to the yard to see what they were barking at. They both were looking in the direction of the crops, going crazy. I yelled at them to shut up, and they went quiet. I stepped right in front of the crops and listened. I heard a whistling from inside of the cornfield. It was undoubtedly a human's whistling. This was the first time I was experiencing a trespasser on the property with my dad not here. I had to hurry inside to get one of the guns. The dogs started barking again. I told my sisters that someone's outside in the cornfield and I had to go chase them away. They both said that was a terrible idea to go run into the cornfield in the dark, and they knocked some sense into me when I realized they were right. I also realized how downright terrifying that would be. So instead, I went out back to the dogs once more going crazy, barking in the direction of the crops. I aimed the gun into the air and fired off a shot which echoed into the night, silencing the dogs. I also was on some kind of power trip in the moment and screamed out to get off our land as loud as I could. I felt that would have done the trick and went back inside. My sisters were both laughing, which caused me to laugh too, but our little laugh amongst each other didn't last long, because the dogs started going crazy again, even crazier this time. I went back outside, ready to do the same thing again, but I felt my heart skip a beat when I saw the guy standing about 20 feet from the dogs, right in front of the cornfield. He looked at me and I screamed, "Hey," at which point he ran into the cornfield. I started running over and fired another shot into the air. I stopped by the dogs. There was no chance in hell I was going in there. I wasn't about to leave the dogs out here either. I unclamped their chains from the hooks and brought them inside the house. I told my sister someone was sneaking around in the cornfield. So what did we do? We called our dad. He told me I had to be the man of the house and protect my sisters. He recommended I fire another warning shot outside if whoever it was came back. After this, we all just gradually went to our respective rooms. My sisters each brought one of the dogs in their rooms, and I brought the gun in my room, just because we were all a little spooked by this. I had the window open, and as I was laying in bed watching a movie on my laptop, I heard a whistling from outside. I hurried to the window and looked out to see someone slowly walking in the grass. Then, like he had some sixth sense, he stopped walking and turned to look at my window, still whistling. This jerk was obviously trying to mess with us and scare us. A very stupid idea when I already made it clear I had a gun. I ran to grab the gun off the bed and aimed it out the window. I shot at the grass a few feet away from him, purposely missing, of course. This cut his little horror movie act short, and he ran out of view of my window towards the front of the house. This time he didn't come back. He'd have to be a fool to come back after that. I obviously told my sisters why I shot, and I assured them he would not be coming back. We never found out who it was or why. It could have been some teen or multiple teens just trying to scare some innocent farmers for fun, or it could have been an actually dangerous person. I used to work as a night restock worker at a supermarket in a somewhat rural town. The store was called Great American. It was the biggest and best supermarket in the area. My shift would be as soon as the store would close at 10. I'd work from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. the latest, restocking the shelves and organizing everything before the next operating day. I of course had the keys to the store for the after hours. It would be a team of 2, myself and one other, either Terry, Carter, or Alfonso. Tonight I was supposed to be working with Terry. I arrived to the store and let myself into the back where all the inventory yet to be stocked was. I started my work using the pallet jack to bring a whole pallet of boxes out to the shopping floor. I started with the bread and nuts aisle, rotating the older loaves in the front and putting the newer loaves in the back. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. I walked to the back area of the store where the inventory was, where we'd leave our belongings. He wasn't back there yet. I left the back door cracked open with a door stopper for him when he would show up. So I went back to work for another half hour. And with still no sign of Terry, I once again went to the back of the store. He wasn't in there, but I noticed the back door was shut. I assumed that meant Terry was here somewhere. I went to open the back door and saw the door stopper was outside, which I thought was weird that he kicked it outside instead of bringing it in. I called Terry's name and it echoed through the room. He didn't call back, so I decided to call him. He picked up, sounding like he was in bed, and I asked him if he was at work. He said he wasn't coming in tonight because he was sick. Suddenly I got the chills. I told him someone kicked the door stopper off the door, and he said it could have just come undone itself. Nobody else was scheduled to work that night. I told him feel better, and we hung up. I wasn't sure if I was convinced that the door stopper came undone itself, because I kicked it under the door pretty tightly. I did a quick look around just to make sure no one was in the back of the store, and when I didn't see anyone, I went back to work, though I felt a slight sense of unease the whole time. I was stocking the remainder of the bread when I heard a loud sound echo from across the shopping floor. Okay, now someone had to be in here. I got off my knees and went to the middle aisle that intersected all the other aisles. I looked straight down the aisle and stood there for a hot second, and all the way on the opposite side of the store in the dairy aisle, a man dressed in black walked past the middle aisle, looking down in my direction. I felt my heart drop. It felt like that scene from the movie Signs where the alien walks past the birthday party. I had to think logically, that maybe this was someone else filling in for Terry's shift that our boss didn't tell me about. I started to speed walk down the center aisle and yelled "excuse me" very loudly. I looked to the left down every aisle I passed since he went towards the front of the store. In one of those aisles, he was waiting at the end of it, standing there fully facing my direction. When he saw me, he walked out of sight in the direction I was just coming from. I yelled "excuse me" again and started to run down that aisle to catch up to him. I didn't get a good look at his face yet. When I got to the front of the aisle by the cash registers, I looked down the direction he went, and I saw him all the way at the end by the bread aisle. Half his body was hidden behind the shelf. His mouth was hanging open, and he started to wave me over, but he didn't say anything. His face was freaking me out. I attempted one more time to speak to him and said, "Who are you?" and he disappeared behind the shelf. I wasn't being paid enough for this. I went outside to sit in my car and call my boss. He picked up and I told him there was some random freak roaming around the store. He told me to get him out of there if I can, or call the police to get him out. I was not going to attempt to physically remove a crazy person from the store, so I called 911. I waited in my car until a police car showed up. I greeted the officer and asked him to follow me inside. We walked around the place looking for the man, and we saw him at one of the aisles again, creepily standing there again as if playing a game. When the police officer commanded him to come here, he actually listened, He was put in handcuffs, and he was the strangest man I'd ever seen. He kept smiling and looking at me non-stop, licking his lips. He had huge bags under his eyes. The only words he spoke were when answering the police officer, saying he was looking for a snack. I didn't like the way he was looking at me as the police officer was walking him back outside to his car. It was this menacing, threatening smile that I haven't forgotten to this day. I continued my work after that. Needless to say, I never left any of the doors open again. A long time ago, I'm talking like 8 years ago, two friends and I, James and Sean, did something really stupid. But at the time, doing stupid things was what we did to pass the time. We're not really friends with James anymore, but Sean and I still talk often, and so oftentimes we'll talk with each other about this story. We were 19 years old. We lived in bumfuck New Jersey. Lots of vacant houses in our old town. And atop a hilly road not far from our houses was an abandoned church. Locals knew about the church. It was on a closed-off road, and it had been abandoned for many years. I'm not sure if it's still standing or what the current state of it is, as I live in Florida now. But James, Sean, and I, being the troublemaking thrill-seekers we were, came up with this genius plan of bringing a Ouija board to the church late one night. This was October, so I guess we were doing it in honor of spooky season. Sean had the Ouija board in his closet, so he brought it. I drove the three of us, so I first picked up James, then Sean, and we just drove straight towards the church. Since the road up the hill to the church was literally blocked off, we had to park on the side of the road and walk from there. We followed the road up the hill to the church, using one flashlight at first, so as not to overdo it and draw any possible attention. But once we were atop the hill, we pretty much all three of us turned on our flashlights. The church was surrounded by woods in basically all directions, and had a gravel parking lot alongside it. The church had been broken into a million times before, and was littered with graffiti, so the big front door was already ajar. Two of us had to work together to pull it open because it scraped on the floor though. Once inside, we naturally just looked around the place with our flashlights to make sure no one else was in there. It was definitely creepy being in that place at night. Sean set up the Ouija board. Then he pulled out these 3 candles from his backpack as well, and he laughed and said it would add to the experience. He placed the 3 candles in a triangle formation around the board, and as they were all lit, we turned off our flashlights. Now the only light in the whole place was from the candles, creating a much more eerie and uncomfortable vibe. We really couldn't see more than maybe 6 feet in all directions. So we began playing with the Ouija board. Sean was doing most of the talking. At this point, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he definitely opened with "Is anybody there?" and the typical cliche Ouija board questions. The planchette started to move and we started to laugh. I knew it was one of them doing it. I feel like it's not possible to play with a Ouija board with your friends without someone jokingly moving around the planchette. We went along with it though, and whoever was moving it spelled out a few words. As this was going on though, we heard a weird crack type sound come from the altar of the church. Best way I could describe it is it sounded like a big piece of wood cracking in half. It was loud and it sounded like it was done by someone. We all jumped in reaction and hurried to shine our phone's flashlights in the direction of the altar. There was no one there as far as we could see. I think both of them were just as freaked out as I was after that. But the place was old and falling apart, so some weird noises here and there didn't seem that crazy, and so we kept going. We all took turns asking the board questions, but the planchette was no longer moving. I think because that crack sound freaked all 3 of us out, and now we were taking it more seriously. This went on for some time, until another sound from the altar area broke the silence again. But before we even had time to shine our lights over there again, something landed on the Ouija board, causing all of us to jump and scream. It was a rock about the size of a golf ball. All 3 of us just had our hands on the planchette 2 seconds ago, and there was no way any of us could have done that. We all 3 got up and ran back out of the church screaming, leaving the Ouija board and candles behind. We ran all the way down the hill and back to my car, and fearing we were being chased, we didn't stick around. I drove us all back to James's house, where we just sat in the car for a good half hour talking, wondering what exactly just happened. Sean is very religious and superstitious as well. He was confident we had reached a spirit of some kind. I don't really believe in any of that stuff. I believe there was someone else in the church with us, which I find to be equally terrifying. Sean went back to the church the next day with James to get his Ouija board back, and to make things even stranger, The Ouija board was missing, but the candles were still in place. When they saw it was missing from the entrance, they decided to just leave right away. This remains to be the single scariest experience of my life. Years ago, I did the night shift at a gas station because I was strapped for cash and needed a second job. I worked the night shift there for a few months. It was around my second or third month that this guy started regularly coming in really late at night, always around 2 a.m. He was about 6 feet tall. He had long, stringy hair.